Police officers, what's the weirdest thing you've caught teenagers or kids doing that's illegal but you found hilarious? I posted this before, but I always find it hilarious because my dad is a goofy, fun guy. He's been a cop for almost 30 years now, and he loves his job because he gets to be out in the community and make a difference. The guy is going to retire next month, and he's stoked he gets to play Battlefield and go on vacation. Anyway, he gets a call one night about some teenagers vandalizing a park. Dispatch lets him know it's a lady that calls 24/7 thinking she's the neighborhood watch. So as he cruises in towards this park, he comes in all lights blacked out and watches from a distance. After a couple of minutes of watching, he realizes these people are playing hide and seek. They also look a little older than just teenagers. He gets out of a car and sneaks up to some of them, hiding in a group behind some trees and bushes. My dad hunkers down behind them, and one of them looks back and sees him. The kid freaks out and starts to run, and my dad grabs him and says, quote, "Dude, shut up or the other team will find us." The guys crack up, because now they realize my dad is down to win this game. He ends up playing hide and seek with this group of 21-year-olds for the next hour. Best part was about 6 months later. I'm having a Halloween shindig at my house, and my dad stops by because he wants to score some burgers off us while he's at work. He walks in, and a guy at the party's like, "Holy crap, your dad is Officer So-and-so. He played hide and seek with us." Story 2. While in college, we got the police called on us for a violent crime in progress. When they pounded on our door, we opened and they barged in. The neighbor reported hearing people yelling things like, "Shut up, you little idiot. I'm gonna SA your effing 12-year-old ass," along with a girl screaming profanity. When the cops saw it was 3 guys and a girl drinking and playing Halo, the one just looks at the others in sheer disbelief. The cop starts to tell us they were called in for SA in progress and tell us how we need to be more careful and whatnot because it could have ended badly. During this time, my friend is still on the headset, and the other guys we were playing with were wondering what the hell is going on and are hassling him. And then my friend says with the cop in the room, "We were apparently SAing you effers so badly somebody had to call the cops." And the cops just can't hold it in and start cracking up. They did give us a noise warning, but no citations. Story 3. Not illegal, but certainly weird. Got a noise complaint call where the neighbors inform dispatch the parents are out of town and suspect underage drinking and or possible drug use. These types of calls are the worst because you can almost guarantee someone is puking in the back of your car and you'll have to write a buttload of local ordinance paper. We roll up, throw the overheads on to scatter as many people as possible, and make a slow walk up to the front door. We play the nobody's home game for a while until one of the kids lets my partner in the back door. We subsequently find around 12 teenagers and what appears to be multiple bottles of rum and vodka, as well as several baggies containing marijuana and some pills. Upon further inspection, we find the liquor bottles have been emptied and filled with water. The marijuana is actually oregano and parsley, and the pills were just aspirin. They were having a pretend party to put on social media, but the strongest thing in the room was the Red Bull. Edit. Crap, I forgot the best part. This was shortly after the movie Superbad came out, and we had a pool going for the first guy to break up a party and use that line, "I assume you all have cracking guns on you," or something similar. I said it, and it was witnessed, but the guys refused payment based on how pathetic of a party it was. Okay, so this is actually kind of cool. Like, the kids are throwing a kind of a make-believe party with substitutes for the real thing. I mean, obviously, it's something that you hope they don't get into as they get older, but the fact that they were at least responsible enough to say, like, "Hey, we can't do this stuff, so let's just make believe." I think that's actually kind of cool. But don't do it when you get older, kids. Story 4. We had a ramp built off the end of our dock with an old anchor rope tied to an old bike. There weren't a lot of local kids, but they all knew that we had no issue if they wanted to stop by and do some jumps, as long as they reeled the bike in and cleaned the mud off afterwards. One day, a bunch of us were taking turns doing jumps and basically just effing around at the lake when this cottage kid from down the road rides up on his brand new, very expensively tricked out BMX. He parks up on the road a few hundred feet away from us watching, then sees his chance and just effing hurdles his way towards the ramp. A couple of people try to wave him off, but the kid goes for it, nails it at a blistering fast speed, and goes flying 3 or 4 times faster than any of us could go on the tether. He pops up out of the lake waving his fists in the air, shouting and carrying on like he just stole an Oscar from Leo. He swims back to shore, and everyone is just staring at him while he carries on. Eventually, one of the girls just says, "Dude, was that a new bike?" The kid's face just kind of crumpled in defeat. We all chipped in and tried to find the bike, but our lake is flooded farmland and the bottom is 6 or 7 feet of quicksand like mud. We drove, we dredged, we poked with paddles, nothing. Kid got in so much crap. I don't think his parents ever bought him another bike. Story 5. Not illegal, but here's my go-to story. I was called to a residence where the female complainant stated that a child from down the street had brought an item to their house and that she was at a loss. Upon arrival, I made contact with complainant and she relayed this story. I was washing dishes and I looked out the window where all the girls, neighborhood girls between 6 to 9 years old, were playing on the trampoline. They were using a large rubber chicken-shaped device to hit each other. I ran out and grabbed it and turned it off. The kids had no clue what it was, and in their defense, it was purple with sparkles and other inlays. Kinda pretty, if not for the fact that it was a 10-inch rubber dildo. Well, I secured the item in an evidence bag, and no crime having been committed, I made a command decision to return it to the owner. I took it and rolled it up in said evidence bag in such a way it would unroll when held by the top. I then knocked on the dildo owner's door, and when she answered, I snapped it down. Using my most curt cop voice, I said, "Ma'am, your daughter secured your personal item and was accosting your neighbor's children with it about the face and neck. At this time, your neighbor does not wish to pursue charges. However, you'll need to sign this evidence form." It was very detailed description, "so I can return your personal item." I've never seen someone show so much embarrassment and humiliation as that lady did. She could not even speak or look at me. The best part was this other lady that was deeper in the residence that kept insisting on knowing what was going on. Story 6. I'm not a police officer, but a police officer approached me for this. Me and my high school girlfriend at the time decided to spend all night hanging out and running around local parks and stuff. Lots of fun. We ended with breakfast, and I decided to drop her off after. I was driving this tiny Nissan pickup truck with a bench seat. She wanted to cuddle, so she didn't put on her seatbelt and instead leaned across the seat and rested her head on my lap. Very sweet and cute. Minutes after leaving the parking lot, a police officer is following us and turns on his lights. She panics, sits up, and discreetly puts on her seatbelt. Once pulled over, the police officer, a young guy, comes up and looks in the window at her. "How old are you?" She says 18, and he asks me to step out of the car. I think I'm about to get a big ticket for not wearing a seatbelt. Tells me, quote, "I saw you driving kind of unsteady, and once I put on my lights, I see a young girl's head pop up through the cab window. So I know why you're driving unsteady." I'm in shock at the implication. I was your age not too long ago, and I get it. You guys like each other a lot. She's a pretty girl. You're just having fun. What I'm concerned about is that she's the proper age, and that other old school officers would nail you for public indecency, reckless driving, something like that. So I want to make sure, in the future, you're wearing protection. Gotta stay safe and concentrate on your driving when you're driving. Gotta stay safe. Okay, buddy? Go have an awesome day. I was speechless, especially because about 10 minutes before, she and I actually did have a quickie in the parking lot that absolutely would have gotten us effed over. Story 7. My friend had a bunch of prop arms and legs in his car. College. He and his other friend were trespassing in the Northfield tunnels. Google it. And when they get back to the car, there's a cop waiting. He asks to see in the trunk, so they open it. He jumps back a sec, but quickly realizes the arms and legs are fake and he hasn't caught some serial killers, then gives them a very stern, shut the F up look as he calls his partner from the car to come look at this, all shaky voiced. And he tells my friend and his friend to put their hands up. Hella serious. The other cop comes over, looks in the trunk, and freaks the F out, screams and runs away back to the car. At which point, the first cop bursts out laughing and tells my friends, he was in Vietnam, and does a get out of here gesture and sends them on their way. So basically, he used my friend to pull a super cruel practical joke on his partner. Story 9. So I pull up in an SUV one night about 2 a.m. Inside, there are 4 teenage boys. The parking lot is pitch black, no businesses nearby are open, and they're sitting there with no lights on. I approach them and get several more units there quickly, because some crap is about to go down. When enough of my peeps get there, we get them out of the car. They are unshakingly polite, respectful, and cooperative, and actually allow us to search their car and then their pockets. We find nothing, not even an odor of marijuana. After exhausting ourselves going through this car, I eventually cave and asked them what the heck they were doing, because I thought for sure they were up to no good, and I was coming up zilch. They had gone to the 7-Eleven and bought a big tub of trail mix. They were sitting in the car eating trail mix. They showed me the receipt for 10 minutes prior and a half-eaten tub of trail mix. I told them this is the weirdest crap I've ever seen and apologized that I ran them through the ringer. They agreed that parking in the dark parking lot and eating trail mix looked sketchy and didn't have hard feelings about the ordeal. I mean, if you've got nothing to hide and you're doing nothing wrong, so what? Let the cops search your car, continue to munch on your trail mix, park wherever you want. It's not a big deal. In fact, without it, we wouldn't have gotten this story, so thank you. Story 10. I feel like a cop has a story about me and two other people. Here goes. I was 20 at the time and at an outdoor party at a friend's. Late fall, 50 degrees or so, no leaves left on the trees. Roughly 50 to 60 people, mostly underage, and most were drinking. My friend's parents lived in a nicer part of a bad area and owned an inflatable bounce house business. They had everything set up. A bounce house, sumo suits, massive slide, all sorts of drunken fun crap. Around 10:30, it's getting loud and the police show up. Someone yells, "Cops, run!" and everyone starts running. I decide to join the crowd and end up hiding in a bush with two people. Then reality hits. I'm wearing a white hoodie. The guy next to me has on a neon yellow hoodie, and this girl has a effing glow necklace on. The bush? Not a effing leaf on it. Right then, a cop walks up, starts laughing and asks, "Really, guys?" and shines a flashlight directly on us. He instructs us to head back to the driveway with the other captives, and gives us all a pretty hilarious speech. Seriously, we're the Flint Police Department. We have a million things better to do than chase down drunk minors. We had 2 murders just this week. We were just coming by to tell you to keep the noise down. Now we're pouring out all your beer and calling your parents. Now we're even. Didn't give out any tickets, just poured out all the beer and called everyone's parents. Story 11. I got a call about 2 kids, teenagers, smoking weed in their parked truck down by the duck pond. You know the one. Anyways, I contacted them and they were very respectful and insisted on filming me on their cell phones while I spoke to them. I told them I wasn't interested in their weed, still being illegal in my state, but I wanted to make sure they got home safe. That the driver was sober enough to operate the vehicle. I did basic FSTs on the driver and determined he was good to drive, all the while his buddy filming every movement and interaction, so I decided to have some fun. By the end of the evaluation, I had the nervous driver doing the YMCA, sprinkler move, and a janky-ass version of the robot before he finally realized what was happening. His buddy filming realized right away, and his defensive lawyer camera pan posture dissolved into a stone kid that was now having a good time again. The driver broke down and busted up laughing before shaking my hand and hopping back in his truck. The cameraman gave me a fist bump and just said, "Thank you," in a way that I took as, "Wow, good to know some of you are human." It's annoying that we have to live with this stigma that gets portrayed by popular media, and quite frankly, some of us deserve it. But it's still nice to know when you get through to someone. I mean, really alter their perception and break down a barrier put up by others. Cops are here to make sure people don't hurt one another. That's it. If you're going to hurt someone else, even if it's just a strong possibility, I'm your worst enemy. But if you're just swaying from the societal norms that change like the weather and being yourself, have at it, man. You only live once. Okay, off soapbox. Oh, proofreading FST is a field sobriety test. Story 12. Not an officer, but a cool story, bro. Some buddies and I were launching rockets out of a soccer park that was empty at the time. Well, the nosy neighbor across the road called the cops and told them we were shooting off fireworks in broad daylight. Anyways, a cop shows up and starts to talk to us. We show him all our rockets, our safety gear, and flight journals that a friend of mine was keeping. The cop goes back to his car and watches us launch a few rockets as we weren't breaking any laws. About 10 minutes later, his off-duty chief showed up in his personal vehicle and joined us in launching rockets. Later, he told us that he had dozens of unfinished rockets, and if we wanted, we were welcome to have them if we promised to invite him to the launch. About a year later, my friend, who kept the journals, had most of them complete. Now, these rockets were expensive rockets that were replicas of actual ones. The chief was happy to see them all in flight and told us that he'll make sure we weren't bothered in the future. Then he shot us. Smile. Story 13. Not a cop, but I was a soldier in the Army National Guard after 9/11. This informs the rest of my story. We were tasked with securing our armory immediately after 9/11 in case anyone decided to attack a soft target. This involved 24/7 armed security by soldiers with M16s in camouflage and body armor. This was immediately after the attacks, and for those who weren't old enough to remember it, Crap was weird at the time. Well, me and several fellow soldiers were guarding our couple-acre compound in the middle of a smaller city. Adjacent to this compound was a park with baseball fields that teenagers would go to and F and smoke weed. Well, a blacked-out car pulled down the road one night, and my buddy was conducting a roving patrol that night, complete with night vision goggles. Well, they weren't in our compound, but they were pretty suspicious, so we called the local law enforcement. By this time, I had met my fellow soldier out back to keep an eye on them. 4 cop cars came screaming down this entrance and drew their weapons. These kids crap. When they found out that the cops were called, they asked who called. The cops shined their lights over at us, and there stood 3 soldiers in camouflage with helmets, tactical vests, night vision goggles, and M16s staring at them. We never saw that car again. I can only imagine the story they told their friends. They were released, and as far as I know, no charges were brought against them. Story 14. One of my friends from a class a couple semesters ago is a cop a couple cities over. He's a cool guy, and we worked on the first class presentation together. Anyway, I'm sitting in my car before our class at approximately 7 p.m., and that's 1900 for you blue liners, and I decide I'm going to smoke before class. This class was required, but almost insultingly easy. I usually walk around the parking lot with my J, but security guards were doing rounds or something, and while they have a reputation for being pretty laid back about pot use, I don't want to take a chance. So I'm inside my car lighting up and just kind of casually reading the textbook, and it's getting kind of smoky in my car, so I look around and then crack a window to let the smoke out. When I saw security was gone, I rolled the window all the way down and ashed my J. I put it back in my mouth and go back to reading. Then, out of the corner of my left eye, I see a cop car coming my way. It passed behind me, and I didn't think anything of it because at that point, I was already really high and forgot I had been smoking. When I realized I had the joint in my mouth still, I got one of those sharp pangs of terror that starts in your chest and shoots up to your head, and your intoxicated brain is like, F, we effed up. Then I looked for the cop car and didn't see it, but then I was looking at my passenger window and was like, man, thank God my windows are tinted. And I look out my driver's side window, and for some reason it doesn't look as dark. I'm thinking maybe it has to do with the placement of the light? Maybe it's because I'm closer to it? Is it because it's because I left it open. After having that realization, I saw headlights again, and I just knew it was the cop car. I'm too high for this gif. Sure enough, the berries come on, and over the speaker I hear, "Show me your hands." I show my hands. "Open the door from the outside and step out of the vehicle." I do it. "Hands! Hands! I want to see them!" Oh, Christ almighty, they think I'm a drug dealer or something. I can't even explain myself, I'm so effing high right now. "Put your hands on the roof of the vehicle and take 1 step back." Crap, I can't do this. "Don't move those goddamn hands!" Oh crap, oh crap, oh crap. "Now twerk!" What? Twerk! What the? Wait, did he tell me to twerk? What the F? I turn around and look at the cop, and then I hear, "Twerk! Twerk! Twerk!" laughing. "Hands on the car!" At this point, I'm not sure what to do or think, and the officer gets out of his car, and it's the dude from my class. He said he saw me smoking up in my car and wanted to F with me. I don't know how to explain what it felt like going to class after that. Story 15. 3 pieces of gold. I'm flattered. Now to move into the lonely mountain and hoard my doubloons, keep them from greedy hobbitses. I'm not a cop, but I get called all kinds of things involving minors. Some background. I live in a safe little town quite away from my work area. I'm driving home after work. I've picked up a huge fancy-ass cake to assuage my worst parent ever guilt for missing my daughter's team trip to regionals. I get a call on my personal phone asking if I'm available to check on a gang fight at a children's nature park 20 minutes from home. A gang fight? What, between the farm kids and the fishing kids? Fine. Call my local PD and ambulance en route. It's midnight and I'm not showing up alone. Cut my lights and engine, roll down my window, pull into the wooded entry to the park. There's much screaming and running, but it doesn't sound right. The park attendant has barricaded themselves in their cabin. I see a local PD pulling in behind me, so I flip my lights on and light up the field. Behold, a group of teenagers wearing the strangest, oh God, my daughter's team in their flashy wrestling singlets. It's January, 40 degrees and wet out. What the ever-loving hell? Assistant coaches come bursting out of the woods with flashlights, sending the worst of them running, like a bowling ball hitting pins, screaming through the woods and holding the playground as a fort, defending from the coaches, who were being held prisoner, naturally. I told the cops pulling in that I recognize everyone, I think. One of them says, "There's my kid. What the hell's going on?" The assistant coach comes running over, breathless and panicked. We stopped the van so they could use the bathroom. They all went running. It's been an hour and a half and we can't get them back in the cars. They're holding the coach hostage. Sure enough, Coach G is being guarded at the top of the wiggly slide. Team leader has the van keys. In his sport cup, on his dangly bits. Wily as F. Apparently, they had a successful meet at regionals and progressed to state, so they decided to celebrate by ambushing the coaches at a playground in the dark. My own daughter hissed, did creepy fingers, and receded into the woods when I shone my spotlight on her to get her tail end over here right now before I tear gas all your friends. One of the officers went to calm the park attendants. We sat on our hoods and watched the madness until the ambulance arrived, the driver complaining about missing dinner. Dinner? Duh! I have a huge cake in the trunk. If teenagers have a weakness, aside from severe mental debilitation, it's food. We get the cake out and quietly walk it over to a picnic table. The night falls eerily quiet. Too quiet. We feel the eyes following us. Prey under the calculating glare of predators. We've stepped into the lion's den. A voice from the darkness. "They have cake!" My partner hollered. "No cake until you release the prisoners." Coach, gagged with someone's headgear, mumbles furiously, "Untie the prisoner! Let him speak!" Coach, "Don't give them anything till you have the keys." Fine. No cake till we have both sets of keys. Much debate is had. There's squabbling amongst the captors. A struggle. One set of keys is thrown our direction by a dissenter. The second set comes soon after. During all of this, we've been setting up flimsy paper plates and plastic forks, ignoring the heathens. Both sets of keys fall near our feet. One prisoner is released. She is escorted over with a captor. Negotiations are made. Will there be cake for everyone? Yes. Soda, 3 kinds. The coach is brought back to the Wiggly Side prison while more heated squabbling is had. One of the cops says over the loudspeaker, "We can do this the easy way or the hard way. I can call your parents to come get you. They're not going to be happy. Or you can hand over Coach G and Coach D. Your reward will be cake and soda. You have 1 minute until we smear these on the parking lot." Chaos. A stampede. We mere adult mortals retreated. Our weapons, our experiences with hardened criminals had not prepared us. Man-sized teenagers in lycra singlets pouring out of the woods, descending upon us from the swings, the monkey bars, the plastic playhouse. There was no choice but to retreat, tripping over our feet, into our cars. We watched the carnage in mystified horror. Plastic forks, plates, and cups neglected. Cake being thrown. Cake shoved into faces. Down singlets with bare, bacteria-laden hands. Frosting smeared into hair and on cheeks. Cake being used as a weapon. Nothing was sacred. Verily, our gods had forsaken us. Soda shaken and fountained over heads. The waste, the carnage was too much to bear. These were no longer our children's sweet faces. Given a taste of power and buttercream with raspberry filling, they had become monstrous mockeries of our children. This went on till there was only the plastic shell carcass of a cake stand. The gray dawn crept through the trees. 4 a.m. The few meandering about, looking for scraps, some of our beasts lying prone and covered in sticky gore on the wet grass. Red raspberry jam filling. A wound of violence in this place of innocence. They stirred, hung over from the violence of the night. The chill of dawn clinging to their weird, patchy body hair. We started the vans, heaters blowing. They came of their own accord then, retreating into the warm corners of bench seats, their aggression forgotten. 32 sticky, exhausted, sated beasts slumbered on their way home, groggling, climbing out at their homes, thanking us for the rides. My own child, whom I did not know anymore, had to be carried, drooling and snoring and covered in the evidence of her shame, into her flowered purple bed. The next day was spent cleaning the team vans, picking up trash at the park, and apologizing to parents. Honestly, if that's how they cause trouble, I'm all for it. Story 16. Not a police officer, but this happened to me. I was going for my morning run one day when I noticed a car following me driving on the edge of the road. I've looked a couple times over my shoulder at the car and noticed that there were red and blue lights, sorta hidden on the dash, and worked out quickly that it was an undercover car, or a detective's car or something. Anywho's, my street is coming up, so after checking it safe, I run across the road to my street and start jogging up the hill. At this point, the car behind me follows me, and there's another undercover car coming down the hill that pulls up onto the side of the road in front of me, and another two cars show up out of nowhere. And all of a sudden, I'm surrounded by the cars with plain-clothed cops all jumping out of the cars and coming towards me. So it's not the cops who are laughing, but obviously I realize they've made a mistake and I start cracking up laughing. I tried my hardest not to, but thinking about the situation was hysterical to me. So as I'm laughing, I say to them all casual like, "Hey guys, what are you up to?" Long story short, someone was breaking into houses in the area and they mistakenly thought it was me. I don't know why. Story 17. Got one for you. Not a cop, but was a stupid teenager. I had just graduated high school and getting ready to go in the Navy. This was early 2000. My buddies and I were at a friend's apartment that we'd party at regularly. He got it before our senior year when he got kicked out of his parents' house for being an effer, so he dropped out, got a job, furnished us a great senior year. Since we were there regularly, the cops were there regularly. The cops in the town grew to know us, but gave us a bit of leeway since we never effed up the neighborhood or tried to be anything but cool with the cops when they were called. Well, my last party there before I get cut. So we're planning to really F crap up. There's tons of people there, more than ever before. Everyone is super loud, puking everywhere, effing everywhere, and the cops show up. Those effers walk past the entire party and lock me up. Got super rough with me and drug me out of the apartment. I'm thinking, I'm going to get kicked out before I go to boot. I'm pissed, scared, drunk, and sad in the back of these dudes' car, and they pull off into a parking lot and pull me out. They take my cuffs off and open the trunk. I look in the trunk, and there's a six-pack in there. Those dudes had found out I joined and was leaving soon. Both were Marines and wanted to welcome and congratulate me. We sat there for a while shooting the crap, and they gave me advice on survival in boot camp, and A school, and how to take it in the ass because I was going Navy, not Marines. They got a call, dropped me off back at the party, wished me good luck, and took off. That was probably in my top 5 coolest nights. Story 18. Not an officer of Reddit, but I'll share this story because I was there. In high school, we used to street race most every weekend, and on this particular weekend, we were down in Long Beach. The cops show up and everyone scatters, but I get blocked in by my friend's car, and it gives the cops enough time to block both of our cars in, leaving me and him and a few other friends stuck. So, obviously, street racing is illegal. You don't even have to be in a car doing the actual racing to be ticketed/arrested. And on top of that, they typically hit you with a host of fix-in tickets if they don't bust you for racing. So the cops jump out and sit us all down on the curb and start asking us what we're doing. We haven't even started to answer him when he starts telling us, "And don't tell me you were just passing through or that you got lost. We're not stupid." He then proceeds to tell us that if we would just tell the truth, the cops would be so much easier on us. They don't know we're down here racing and checking out cars and learning about parts and all that. If we wouldn't lie so much, we'd get off with a warning. But instead, the cops get lied to all the time and it's insulting. So they ticket us. So he's been lecturing us for about 5 to 10 minutes, throwing in a few digs along the way, calling one of my black friends buckwheat and another Japanese kid fat boy. And we're all sort of laughing, but also clearly still uncomfortable with the situation that likely involves us getting some tickets and stuff. So he turns to me and asks which car is mine. I point and he says, "Okay, here's the deal. We're gonna run a quarter here, and if you win, everyone here gets to go home. If you lose, I'm giving you and your friends some fix-it tickets. About 14 in total if I'm counting correctly." So I'm nervous as crap about this, but I agree. My friend goes to call out the start. Another drives down a quarter mile to mark the finish, and we get set, and I win. So I'm coming back to the start, and I pull up. Cops already back, and as I'm getting out, the cops jump out and announce that we're all going to jail. We're all standing there, mouths open I'm sure, and then one of the cops starts laughing and tells us they're joking. They proceed to lecture us for a little longer about how street racing is dangerous, but they understand and they were kids once and be careful and all that crap. Then they yell out, "Strong Beach!" peel out and disappear. So maybe not the weirdest crap cops have ever seen, but it was definitely illegal and they seemed to get quite a kick out of it. Story 19. My favorite story that I like to tell trainees is when my partner and I busted up a Christmas party, entirely by accident. We got a call for a noise complaint out in the unincorporated county area. We drive down about a quarter mile of driveway, one of those houses, almost entirely lined with cars. We can hear the music from the main road. We both pull in with the intention of finding someone reasonably sober, telling them to turn it down and calling it a night. This was close enough to shift change that we could ride the call out and no one would have accused us of milking the call. Instead, one erstwhile young partygoer comes staggering out from the backyard, does the most comical double take I've ever been witness to, then takes off running from whence he came, screaming, "Cops! Cops!" The end result was similar to flipping on the lights in a nasty apartment, scattering teens like cockroaches. My partner and I were too busy laughing at the cliche to do anything other than heckle the ones trying to be stealthy in the woods nearby. Found the homeowner, music was turned down, no one got a DUI. The few that didn't scatter too far, we made clean up all the beer cans on the property. Crappy thing to do, leaving a mess for all the hosts to clean up. Story 20. Dispatched to a suspicious activity. Car parked on a residential street at night. Cold as hell outside and rainy. Not sure what was suspicious, but complaint didn't want to be contact. I find the car and pull up behind the same time. A second unit pulls up in front, and we light them up. Don't see anybody in the car. Look around to make sure somebody isn't coming up on us. Nope. I look in the back seat and see blankets moving. What the? Bang on the window, and finally a head pops up. Teen kid who didn't seem to have a stitch on. Okie doke, by yourself, naked in a car. Then hear a voice. Oh, someone else. He says yes, he and his girlfriend were having fun. Yes, they're both naked. Well, no biggie. About then, she opens the door and bolts, buck naked running between houses. We don't know if she has warrants or what, but know she'll freeze to death pretty quick. I ask why she ran, as other squad gives chase, but kid is as surprised as we were. This girl was a effing track star. We get 2 other squads involved and after 20 minutes find her near frozen in a storage shed. The reason she ran? She recognized my voice and knew me from church. The pastor's daughter. Nice. We told her she was stupid, could have died, got 4 squads involved, etc. I never said a word to the other officers about who she was and never mentioned it after to her. Just smiled when I saw her every Sunday. Yeah, I think that's probably the best way to hold a kid accountable, is to not necessarily rat them out and tell, but just give them that look. Yeah, I know. I know what you do on Saturday nights. But at least you still made it to church. Story 21. As the comment trend goes, I'm also not a LEO, but I did have an incident which could have ended way worse than it did. When I was 15 or 16 years old, me and 6 or 7 buddies of mine were playing with our new airsoft guns at a local park at about 11 p.m.-ish. Park signs clearly indicated that the park was closed from dusk to dawn and trespassers would be prosecuted, blah blah blah. Anyway, we were running around with our guns, a few of which resembled an M16, HKG3, and so on, and our full black and or camo combat uniforms, we noticed a patrol car entering the parking lot. We decided it would be in our best interest to temporarily halt our current game and not brandish our guns to a misinformed officer. So we set all our equipment on a nearby picnic table and tried to make ourselves look as visible as possible so as not to arouse suspicion of troublemaking. Long story short, no one got in trouble, but we were told that we weren't allowed in the park after hours and we needed to go home. I should also note that as the officer approached us, his hand was on his gun. Didn't think much of it at the time, but looking back, I suppose we should all count our blessings that no one got shot that night. Some of those guns, even with the orange tips, look pretty real. Story 22. Not a cop, but still a funny story. I was a senior in high school and had turned 18 a month before. We had been throwing eggs all over town every weekend for the last few months. We would buy those packs of 5 dozen at a time. This particular time, we had been following a pizza delivery driver from the pizza place I worked at, and waited for him to stop and make a delivery. When he stopped, we swung wide and unloaded from almost every window of my buddy's parents' Suburban. Then we attempted our clean getaway. Unfortunately, the house of the pizza delivery was at the top of a steep hill with one way up and one way down. An older man driving in front of us stops his car in the middle of the street, blocking our escape route. He then gets out of his car and starts walking towards us, yelling, "I saw what you did. I'm calling 911. I look at my buddy who is driving and said, "Kill the headlights. Let's get the F out of here." He throws the car in reverse and boom, right into a parked car. At that point, we knew we were screwed, so we waited for the cops to arrive. Must have been a slow night, because sheriff, CHP, and park police all showed up. We let our friend, who was in the back seat, sneak out down the hill. Because of his super strict parents found out, he would have been sent to some sort of military school. So my buddy and I took the blame while he took off. My buddy gets a reckless driving ticket, and I, being over 18, get a vandalism charge. Fast forward to my court hearing. I get a $300 fine and have to turn myself in for booking at the county jail. I had a girlfriend drive me out to the county jail about a week later. I go through a metal detector, go downstairs, and wait for my turn to get fingerprinted and my photo taken. I'm sitting in a room full of people who had been there before, but this was my first and last. I was effing scared. People are making small talk about their charges, and we kinda go around the room. One guy says, "I'm here for assault." A woman says she got popped for a controlled substance. When they got to me, I said, "I'm here for throwing eggs." Everyone in the room laughed at me. In hindsight, it taught me a valuable lesson. That was as close to real jail as I've ever been, and as close as I ever want to be. Story 23. A friend of mine had the police called on him for what got way out of hand real fast. So a group of my friends had found this tree house in a forest near some fields that they used to go chill in, listen to music, smoke up, drink a few beers, not harming anyone. Anyway, nobody really went up that way, so that hadn't expected to go there one day and find it smashed to crap. Real jerk move by somebody there. They'd had some rad graffiti in there and all. So, of course, the next time they went up there, two of them decided to fix it up. One had a hammer and nails and began piecing together what he could. The other guy made a little fire and was chatting to a girl that had joined them. I don't know if they knew at this time, but some people used to walk their dogs up in the field next to where they were. This is important. Anyway, they're getting on with things. Flirting with the girl is going well, and she's laughing at jokes, the fire's being tended to, and the treehouse hammered together again. Suddenly, the guy hammering feels something jab into his back, and he's told, "Drop the hammer!" He puts it down and is told to put his hands up. They were surrounded by armed SWAT officers. This is a real big deal, as in the UK, regular officers don't carry guns. He knew crap was going down. Likely being slightly drunk underage and a bit high, I imagine, he was having a nightmare of a time there. Eventually, it calmed down and they explained it all and the officers laughed it off and headed back. They found out that some woman walking her dog had seen the fire and the hammering and heard the girl laughing but thought it was screaming. She put two and two together and got over 9,000 and called the police saying two teens were killing a girl with a hammer and burning the body. That's how two guys I know almost got killed by SWAT. Story 24. I was working as a security guard at a major amusement park. When we closed the park at night, we had to start at the back corner and walk to a choke point to move everyone out. We had to check all the public buildings and bathrooms and such to make sure no one is hiding or left to get locked in the park overnight. Well, one day we're closing and I go to one of the bathrooms to check and make sure no one is in there. Well, as I get closer, I hear that someone is in there. As I get even closer, I hear what is now sounds of people having sex. I'm thinking this is going to be so funny to open the door and see the look on their faces, so I grabbed two of the other security guards to join me when I went in. I opened the door, and not in any stall or anything, two kids that I later found out were 7 and 8 were there fully dressed, dry humping in the doggy-style position. The boy freaked out and ran into the stall. The girl just started crying. All of us, once excited, are all now just like, what the F? We took the kids to the office where we called the parents. I'm sure it was the most awkward time of those kids' entire lives. The parents of the girl arrive and take her. I wasn't with her at this point due to us separating them. The boy's dad walks in about 10 minutes and we tell him what happened and he's in shock and says he has no idea how this happened, etc. Well, when the boy is leaving, I hear the dad asking him what the F he was doing and where he learned that, and what he said will stay with me forever. Don't worry, Dad, I wore protection. Okay, so this behavior is clearly taught. If not by Dad, he's picking it up from somewhere. How does an 8-year-old, I understand it's natural, it's a human, or just, part of being a mammal, I guess, is just, breeding and reproduction and all that, but how does this kid know about protection? Somebody has already had the talk with this 8-year-old, so who's it gonna be? Story 26. This will probably get lost. In high school, senior year, the week before Halloween, I got crap-faced with some friends. Our friend Becca was sober, so naturally we found it to be a good idea to drive to our friend Trevor's house and smash his pumpkins. Well, on the way there, we spotted the biggest pumpkin ever. Not kidding, it was well into the 50 to 65 pounds range. Took 2 people to carry. I couldn't bring it to the car by myself. We haul the effing thing to his house, and me and a friend are relentlessly trying to crush this thing on his porch, giggling and crap. It was so hard to break open, it just bounced off the concrete. Finally, the effing thing breaks on the ninth seismic slam. His dad, Mr. Fred, yells out the window to scare us. At this point, he didn't know it was us. We both took it back to the car and drive our drunk asses through the window. My feet are hanging out as Becca speeds off and we hear, whoop whoop, oh, F. Cop came out, gun drawn, and we immediately attempt to de-escalate. He says, if you have any drugs or alcohol, I want to know where it is now. Hands where I can see them. He pulls us two dip craps out of the car to wait at the back while he talks to the driver and our other friend. I look over at Mr. Fred just smiling at me. Great guy, by the way. And I go, hi, Mr. Fred. He says, y'all gonna come clean this up when he lets you out the drunk tank? Laughs maniacally. He's loving the moment. Long story short, Cop lectured us about underage drinking and whatnot, then asked my friend what he wanted to do with his life. My friend, with no hesitation, says, I want to be a cop. Bingo. Dude immediately switched gears. Was like, you're good kids. It's good that you had a designated driver. If this gentleman isn't going to press charges, I'll let the drinking and everything else go. We got off consequence-free. Mr. Fred never told my parents and is still close friends with them both. Story 27. Not a cop, but this is my glory days story. Had myself a Mustang hatchback in my youth. At one point, my teenage self and friends thought it would be fun to fold the seats down, lay 3 or more guys in the back and go whipping around corners in a parkade really fast, slamming into each other and whatnot. Good, clean fun. Yes, we were all virgins. Why do you ask? Anyhow, one night we get up to do this around midnight so that the parkade is completely empty. It's mostly used for office parking downtown. I drive up to the top level of the parkade, park, and then open the hatch to pull out all the junk in my trunk. Ha! Amongst everything is a club. You know, the kind you put on your steering wheel to prevent it from being stolen. Load the boys in and go for a rip. Do this several times, each time stopping at the top of the parkade to let out the dizzied occupants who stumble out and lay on the ground. Good times. Well, it's getting late. Time to go for a last run. 2 boys in the trunk, 1 guy in the passenger seat, and me driving. 2 other guys decide they will walk down the stairs and meet us at the bottom. Whatever. Halfway down, I see several police cars zooming up the ramp. They block me in and I stop. I yell at the guys to get up and out, but they're all too dizzy or effed up and don't see what I'm seeing. I get out with my hands up and see the cops closest to me, guns drawn, hiding behind their squad car doors. Get down on the ground! They all yell, and I'm not one to argue. Now, I've never been in crap in my life, so of course the only effing thing running through my head is they literally drag the other occupants out of my car, put them on the ground, and search us, and the car is, F, I'm gonna get a goddamn seatbelt ticket for the assholes in the back, aren't I? Poor ignorant me. After searching me and the whole car, like full-blown tearing crap apart looking for something hidden, the sergeant pulls me aside and asks just what the F we were up to. Again, I'm effing afraid of getting a goddamn seatbelt ticket, so I'm hesitant, but thankfully I open up and tell him the truth. He gives me the strangest look and then goes to question one of my friends. He looks at me and I throw up my hands and then he, also thankfully, corroborates my story. The cops then look at each other, have a quick discussion, and come back to ask, where's the club? I sheepishly go dick it out of my trunk and show them. More stares and another huddle. Then they come back a final time and line us all up. Boys, we were called because we were told you were a gang. We can see that you aren't doing anything like that, so we're going to let you go. I find out from a friend who works at the 911 dispatch that some distraught lady from an adjacent apartment building saw us loading and unloading people into the back of my car, then coming back with them all disoriented and, in her opinion, beaten up due to some gang initiation. The weapon? She suspected my goddamn club. One of the cops looks really aggravated that this was all there was gonna be and that it wasn't a real gang takedown. Another one, who was much cooler, told us to, quote, stick to skateboarding to stay out of trouble. We all shared a nervous laugh over that. Got in my car and left. The 2 guys who had walked down there were at the bottom waiting for us, but there was no goddamn way I was stopping for them, so I left them there like a good friend. Found out afterwards that one of them had been carrying a decent amount of weed on him, and had stashed it in my car prior to walking down at the end, which before this point I had no idea of whatsoever, but the cops didn't search them for whatever reason. We eventually met up with them later and and shared laughs, and still reminisce about it today. Story 28. Not exactly pertinent, but still relevant. I basically got super troopered in real life. When I was a dumb 18-year-old, my friends and I went on a blaze ride in my car. After smoking, out of a glass bubbler, we decided to go to Mickey D's, because we were young, dumb, and high. Oh, and my registration was suspended for an unpaid ticket, which I knew. 1 mile from our destination, cop starts following, pulls me over for said registration. Since I knew, I had just been praying he wouldn't run my tags, and had pushed the bubbler down between the seat cushions. Mickey D's was in sight, too. He asks all of us to get out, explains the registration, and starts writing tickets. No search, no drug questions, but a second car had come shortly after. As cop number 1 writes the paperwork, cop number 2 starts making casual conversation, eventually working in, "So you guys ever smoke pot?" To which we all replied no. I forgot to mention I had a large trash bag of beer cans from a party I had the previous night, so that was the topic he had segued from. His next question, all friendly smiles, was, "Why not? It's not that bad for you. Drinking that beer is much worse." My friends all responded with the usual, "It's illegal, causes cancer, etc." He gets me with, "What about you? Never even tried it?" To which I reply, "Well, it's not exactly fruits and vegetables." A good nervous laugh was had by all. By now, cop number 1 is done with the tickets, says we're good to go. Can't believe our luck. And then abruptly says, verbatim, "But before you leave, I have to ask, do you have anything in the car I should know about? Knives, drugs, grenades, rocket launchers?" I laugh and say no, but then he asks if I mind if he takes a quick look. Not expecting the question and wanting to be casual, I say sure, go ahead. Sure enough, he pulls out the $150 glass bubbler. On the spot, I act surprised, insist it's not mine, and ingeniously use the bag of beer cans as the perfect excuse. Some kid at my party last night wanted to smoke weed. I wouldn't have it in my house and said he could do it in my car. He must have left that there. I had no idea. Cop says, with a wry smile, "If that's true, then you won't mind me smashing this nice-looking pipe on the ground." Of course, I say, "Not at all, but like right here in the street? Isn't that littering?" He laughs and says, "Would you rather me arrest you?" So I smash it in the street. Luckily, we had smoked all the weed, so it was just the bubbler in the car. So they let us go, and we freak out for the quarter-mile drive to Mickey D's. Once there, I look at the tickets, written before the search, and it's like 4 tickets, all for the same thing, but different charges, like driving with suspended tags and displaying tags with improper registration, etc. Basically threw the book at me for traffic violations, but still preferable to the alternative. Then I noticed that all 4 tickets, each for a different amount, add up to a total of $420. That can't be a coincidence. I'm pretty sure they were effing with us the whole time. TLDR, get high on a car ride, get pulled over, cop writes tickets. Other cop casually makes convo, asks why we drink beer but don't smoke weed. Alcohol is worse. They say we can go, but ask if I have any rocket launchers and if they can check the car. Find my hidden water pipe, tell me to smash it in the street, so I do. Later, I notice all tickets add up to exactly $420. This is obviously not a coincidence. The cops were definitely effing with you the entire time. $420, there's astronomically low odds of those tickets just conveniently adding up to that when you're potentially getting busted for smoking pot. But that's obvious and everybody knows that, so let's just go ahead and move on. Story 29. I was not the cop, like most of these posts, but I was doing something stupid. I was speeding away from Austin after a weekend visiting friends and hitting up some resale shops. As I was speeding through the next town down the road, I saw a police officer heading the other way who started to pull into the U-turn lane just as he disappeared behind the hill. I knew he would come after me, so I thought, stupidly, why not try to lose him? I quickly exit the U-turn myself and started heading back towards Austin. Now came the awkward moment where I saw the police car heading the opposite direction, and I hoped he would not recognize me going the other direction. He did. He plowed through the median, right through the ditch and right behind me. He pulled me over, and I guess he assumed I was ready to run. That was the first time I was instructed to put my hands on the roof of the car through the bullhorn. I feigned ignorance to his existence and said I just realized I had to head back to Austin for something I forgot. He was not buying it, but he could not prove I knew he was coming after me. He was convinced I had something to hide. He asked to search my car. Here's the thing, I collect Smurfs. It's not the obsession it used to be, but it has been something I've done for most of my life. That weekend had been especially successful in Austin. My trunk was filled with plush Smurfs. When I opened the trunk, I watched him try to wrap his mind around it. He turned to me and asked if he could open a Smurf. I guess he figured they were full of drugs. I told him that would hurt the collector value, but if he really suspected me of drug smuggling, he could go ahead. There was a long moment as he pondered cutting into this man-child Smurf doll. He instead just moved some of the Smurfs around, then slammed the trunk closed. He wrote me the ticket, shook his head, and left. I drove away, slowly rethinking my life. Story 30. I grew up in a rural Midwest town of about 800 people. No movie theater, no mall, only 2 gas stations and 1 ice cream shop that was open for like 3 weeks. There were 2 town cops, Cecil and Steve. Cecil was older and well respected. He lived 2 doors down from my family. Hell, we were all neighbors. Steve didn't live in town, so it only seemed right to F with him. Sometimes he was on duty. We'd play Steve. He'd sit by the driveway and try to catch speeders, so his attention was in front of him. We were all in junior high and fairly athletic, at least we thought so. Anyway, the dumb/gullible guy would run up and jump on his trunk to get his attention, and the chase was on. We all had bikes, so we could tear through yards, parks, fields, etc. It was an incredible rush. I remember laying down in a cornfield while Steve drove by with his searchlight looking for us. I also remember pedaling like hell to barely beat a train that Steve got stuck waiting for. Steve, poor bastard. Man, I bet he was pissed. He didn't last very long, or maybe we only did that for a summer before some of us got girlfriends. I don't know if what we did was illegal, but I guarantee he remembers it. It was 25 or so years ago. The things you do in a small town when you're not supervised and bored. We also climbed the water tower on occasion, but that's another story, and I'm guessing that was most certainly illegal. Story 31. When I was an MP at a training base, we would find these young enlisted service members, joint training base, effing in all sorts of places. Baseball dugouts, the base pool after hours, underneath an overhang of their training building, the sand hazard on the golf course, you get the point. Well, one night I went to see the base club on the training side to do a walkthrough and fill my water bottle. I come out, start walking around the pool, which was right next to it, and start making my way back to my vehicle. I hear a rustling in the large dumpster behind the club and bang on it with my baton, thinking it was a raccoon or possum. The noise stopped, and instead of a large rodent popping out and running away, some half-naked E1 with his pants around his ankles jumps out and tries to run away. I quickly grab him and call another unit out. My buddy Jay gets there pretty quickly and sees what I stumbled across and shines his light in the dumpster. I hear this loud, "Oh, holy crap, get the F out of here," and out comes this girl with no pants and holding a bra in one hand, with garbage and crap all in her hat and the most pathetic look on her face. We let them get as dressed as they immediately could, ID'd them, and separated them in our 2 vehicles. My buddy Jay and I walk a good ways away and start dying laughing. We get that out of our system, talk to them individually, fill out field interview cards, let them grab any personal items they may have left in the dumpster, and give them courtesy rides back to their respective barracks under the guise of getting them back before curfew. We figured the embarrassment of them getting caught in the act, covered in garbage, was punishment enough. Edit. Reading through some of these on a dead-ass night makes me wish anything like this would happen. But it did remind me of a time I was working in the jail. A bar magician was arrested for public intoxication while I was on shift, and I had to log his property. It's the usual literal bag of tricks. Fake thumb for the disappearing handkerchief, deck of cards, a lighter wallet. This magician is drunkenly telling me what everything is used for, and then I come across a raw hot dog. Dumbfounded, he just holds it up and says, "A hot dog?" The magician, without skipping a beat, says, "Well, a magician's gotta eat." Not sure why. Maybe it was the late hour into the shift, but I was dying laughing at those words. Story 32. Another one of those sure as hell don't have the time stories. Not so short, but sweet. My buddy and I were traveling to a party at a beach house up in Hampton, Massachusetts. We were teenagers at the time. We were clearly going there to get high and drunk and do all the things your mother told you not to do. Well, for anyone that knows the area, there's a nice long stretch of road that cops like to sit on to catch speeders. Only this time there happened to be 2 stadies and a local cop parked next to each other shooting the crap. We thought nothing of it as we passed them, but a few seconds later got a call saying the party was just raided by the cops, so we turn around. Someone in their shindig knew what was happening, because as soon as we pulled around, all 3 of them pulled out, but it was the local cop doing the talking. He asked us where we were headed. We say to the arcade, but my buddy's parents needed him back at home for some crap. He asks if we can search the vehicle. Surely he was looking for booze or drugs on the way to that busted party. Joke's on him. We were entirely clean, except a little over a dozen stolen signs sitting in our trunk. Not street signs, but several no parking signs from some famous abandoned buildings nearby, as well as a 5-foot by 3-foot pool rules sign we nabbed from a local public pool. Cop 1 looks at Trooper 1, who looks at Trooper 2. They all stand there for a second before a cop says, "I'm not doing the paperwork on this," shuts the trunk and tells us to get the F out of there. Story 33. Not a cop, but this is a story from high school. What started as a water fight between a bunch of our female friends and us guys on a May 24th weekend, Canadian holiday, when I was in grade 9, escalated each year into a planned guys versus girls food fight where the object was to prepare and attack the other team with the most disgusting food you can think of. Long story. By the time I was in grade 11, the location had migrated from a parent's backyard to the local small town park, which was rimmed with woods and a great place to stage an epic battle. This became a big deal, and we would plan weeks in advance, and on the night of, there would be a lot of scouting and planning before the actual food fight would commence. Most of us were wearing either black or camouflage in order to be more sneaky. Well, by 11 o'clock at night, the battle was in full swing. Several guys had been covered in sour milk. Girls were wearing a slop mixture from water balloons filled with mustard, rotten fruit, pickled juice, and other disgusting things that I can't remember anymore, but it was nasty. And then the cops showed up. I guess they heard or someone reported the noise in the local park. Keep in mind, it's a long weekend where normally the cops would have their hands full with drunken parties, and I'm sure that's what they were expecting to encounter from the commotion in the woods down beside the park. What they find instead is a bunch of teenagers, completely sober, dressed in black, and covered with the most disgusting food we could think of. They were completely dumbfounded. We basically explained what we were doing and promised that we would clean it up in the morning. They let us go, and I'm sure walked away shaking their heads. Story 34. Okay, so there's this program a couple towns north where high school juniors and seniors can attend college, like live in the dorms and everything, and graduate with a high school equivalent and about 57 to 64 college credit hours. Pretty competitive as far as getting in goes, but most people in the program are pretty chill when it's not finals week. This was a couple years back, mind, but it's become sort of a legend. So there are vending machines all over campus, and they're a fair bit pricey. Not movie theater bad, but not Walmart discount either. At any rate, the kids in the program, gonna call them P, have a meal plan for the meal halls and maybe an allowance for some little restaurants nearby. Chipotle, Potbelly's, Pita Pit, Jimmy John's. Most kids are pretty frugal though. Most of the kids in the program are Asian, which should tell you something about it. They've even got mandatory meetings every once in a while to make sure people don't go all room rat. Whatever, they're all pretty smart. So a couple of these kids thought it would be a great idea to make fake cash so they could con the vending machines for free food. After all, it's free. Thing is, this didn't go unnoticed. I mean, they got away with it for a fair while, but then the FBI got involved. You heard me. The FBI. See, what they were doing is technically fraud, but they're all minors, so they got away with it. Still a fairly awesome investigation, though. Story 35. A friend of mine just got back from Afghanistan, and he came over to let loose one night before he had to go back. We drank, got absolutely crap-faced, but it wasn't enough. He wanted an experience. I told him that I have an ounce of shrooms that the Marines wouldn't be able to test him for. Even though he had never did drugs a day in his life, he was in. I asked 2 other experienced trippers, and they were game for some free boomers. Then the rest of the gang, having never done it, was cajoled into trying out. Dude's gotta go back to Afghanistan. What's the worst that can happen to you? Your mom finds out? These are the best shrooms you'll ever find. So we go into the woods by my house and just wander around until the sun comes up. The whole time he's having a blast, pretending like we're fighting aliens around every corner. Finally, we head back to base just after dawn to debrief. We're crawling out of the brush by this water treatment facility with a long driveway where I know cops like to chill and rest when there's nothing going on. Lo and behold, this cop notices the 8 of us and thinks we're up to no good. He's questioning our intentions, doesn't believe us. What are you doing? Just roaming around in the woods exploring nature. I don't think you understand. Tampering with the water treatment facility is a federal offense. Sir, I live over there, points to house, and I assure you we were just out for a stroll. At this hour? You must think I'm an idiot. Finally, I just tell him that I'm tired and invite him to call me if he finds anything out of the ordinary. Bear in mind, we're all tripping balls. My friend is as super worried as can possibly be, with the GI Bill hanging over his head. I just start walking away, assuring the cop that everything's cool here and there's nothing more to discuss. I wish him a good day and head off, leaving my friends there who have no idea what the F to do. They don't want to leave, but they don't want to stay and get in trouble, not knowing even what the F they would be in trouble for. In the end, the cop watches us walk to my house, ensuring that it was indeed the one I pointed to. We call it a night, but to this day, I just wonder what was going through that officer's head. He seemed dumbfounded that we had no story to tell, but it was the truth. Well, half of it. Story 36. I'm a little late, but this is the best story that involved cops that I have. Summer of 2010, I was about 3 days from turning 18. A friend of mine that I played sports with has this cousin who's pretty wealthy and made his fortune playing online poker. Anyway, he's out of town for the weekend and gave my friend the keys to his house for us to hang out in. He has this ranch-style mansion that's surrounded by a horse stable and some pasture for cows. This place is huge. It has a billiards room, wine cellar, cigar room, gym, theater, etc. So what did we do? We decided to throw a party, of course. So we invite a lot of our friends from our school. We decided to make it themed so that it was a pirate party. Everyone came dressed as pirates. Little did we know that our friends told their friends and so on and so forth, and the rumors of the Mansion Pirate Party began to spread like wildfire throughout the city high school circles. In my town, there are about 8 high schools, and it got around to all of them. So the party begins and people start steadily showing up. This is great. We have enough alcohol. We're making money by asking for cover charges for guys who show up. It's not too crazy. Until about 11, that is. Suddenly, there's this crazy influx of people just pouring into the mansion. We had about 50 or so people there before, but now it's jumping between 200 to 250 people and climbing. It was surprisingly orderly for appearing so chaotic, but I couldn't really breathe in there, so I walked out in front and started talking with some friends. Then my friend who helped throw the party comes outside with a wad of cash. He had stayed sober since he was the host. He asked to borrow my truck to go make an alcohol run. I say sure, throw him my keys and continue on with my conversation. Next thing I know, I'm talking and having fun, but I hear this distant flapping sound not too far off from the house. The people around me go all quiet and say they can hear it too. It was getting closer and sounded an awful lot like a helicopter. I think I see it in the sky as it approached the house. Then I hear this loud clicking sound and the entire grounds of the mansion is flooded in spotlight. It was the police. One of the kids I was talking to runs into the house and amidst all of the confusion yells, "It's the cops!" at the top of his lungs. Being 17 at the time, I was not about to wait around to see what happened, so I called my friend and he grabbed me up the road and we came back to lock up after the cops had left. Now, this part is entirely subjective, but what I imagine the view from the helicopter looked like was a huge house suddenly pouring out about 300 pirates who hopped the walls and either ran into the pasture with the cows, the stables with the horses, or the desert with the cactus. Apparently, they found one kid unconscious in the pasture because he was so busy looking up at the helicopter and so drunk that he ran full bore into a cow and hit his head on the ground. Story 37. A little preface. I'm from Scotland, and our police officers have a reputation for being brilliant. Rewind. I'm 15 with a large group of friends as we're heading out camping, which involved finding a field, popping up a giant tent, and getting crap-faced. I was in charge with carrying the drink and had 3 bags on my back, bigger than myself, and was struggling to walk upright. The police spot us, and we all start crapping bricks. We're entering private property with alcohol, all while being underage. My friends bolt, and one screams, "Run like you stole it," and I take one step and fall flat on my face. I'm alone. The police officers get out and start pissing themselves laughing. I'm about crying at this point. I'm a tiny 15-year-old girl, and I'm breaking the law. One asks, "What's in the bag?" And I reply, "Would you believe me if I said my hopes and dreams?" Cue the second officer pissing himself laughing again. They bundle me into the car, and I'm shaking like a leaf, thinking of all the ways my mother is going to tear me a new a-hole for this. They drive up a creepy dark road and drop me where my friends were. Took my number and said they will call in the morning to check up on us and if we need a lift home. To this day, I'm still baffled by it all. So that's some pretty quick thinking on your feet to say, yeah, that's my hopes and dreams in the bag. I mean, if I was a cop, I would definitely laugh that off and let you off as well. So yeah, sometimes, throw a little humor. It couldn't hurt. What's the worst that can happen? They arrest you, right? So just, throw some crap at the wall, hope it sticks. Story 38. About a year or so ago, I was working a summer internship in a neighboring town, and I was in the beginning stages of a summer fling with one of my coworkers. Since it took me almost an hour to drive to work, my coworker said I could stay with him in his minivan for a few nights, and we'd make it like a camping trip. We packed card games and snacks in sleeping bags and took the seats out of the back of the van. Well, we didn't really know where to park, and we didn't want to pay for a campsite. We ended up parking on the side of a scenic road. The night got pretty hot and steamy, and we fell asleep sans clothing. At this point, I should mention that this guy was really into airsoft guns. For those of you who don't know, airsoft guns are sort of like a midpoint between paintball guns and BB guns. Small pellets, but lots of tactical teams like to get together and play, similar to paintball. When we cleaned out the back of his van, we realized he still had an airsoft gun back there. It looked like a Tommy gun, one of those huge ones like you might see in a mafia movie set in 1920. We just threw it in the front seat and went on with our night. Another side note, the passenger side window was broken and didn't roll down. About 7 a.m., coworker wakes up and says, "Radio lady, don't move. I think someone's outside." We open our eyes and see someone moving around the car. I freeze because we're both butt-ass naked in the back of this van, and I can't tell who's outside until a big flashlight clicks on. Crap, cops, I think. Now, we don't drink or do drugs or anything, but we were naked, although we were in sleeping bags. And we're thinking we're about to get in big trouble for indecent exposure or something. Meanwhile, this cop moves around the passenger side of the car and knocks on the window. Coworker has no choice but to get up, chicken flopping around, and reaches to open the door because the window is broken. Cop sees coworker reaching and suddenly notices his huge illegal-looking firearm in the front seat. Cop draws his weapon and yells at coworker not to touch the weapon. Hands up! Then he notices me in the back. So here we are, some guy parked on the side of the road with a naked, unmoving girl in the back seat and a huge gun in the front seat. Looked pretty bad, and we couldn't get the window down to communicate because it was broken. So coworker is shouting that the window is broken and he has to open the door for the cop. Then I have to explain to the cop that everything is fine and we were just camping out for the night. Airsoft gun, blah blah. Cop thought it was pretty funny and just told us to find somewhere better to park. Story 39. Not a cop, but as we were getting wasted on a night out at a beach club, one guy and one girl in our group suddenly decide to run off and have their own drunken adventure. After some intense sexy time in a corner, they climb into the back of the club next door and steal a few bottles, and are caught red-handed by the managers trying to escape, who summon the cops. They pull off this elaborate, impromptu, improvised, and matching story of how the girl was pissed off at the guy for cheating on her, and in a fit of rage, grabbed the bottles to smash them on the guy. They talk with the cops for hours, and the whole time, the silly young cops are so distracted and acting weird because of the supposed awkwardness of the whole cheating situation, thanks to some great acting, and decide to focus on administering relationship advice, telling the guy how lucky he is to have such a good-looking girl and why he would want to throw it all away, etc. The whole time, the girl is just nuts and sobbing, and the guy is like, "Babe, please give me a chance." Despite it being obvious that they climbed in through the back, the manager somehow buys it too. He was probably too lazy to receive the CCTV footage after talking for hours. The sun is almost rising, and they got off scot-free. Story 40. Like most others in this thread, I'm not an officer, but my friends and I were the cause of laughter, or at least a good amount of amusement, for a couple of officers. So several months ago, my best friend, one of our other friends, and a couple of our more distant friends came up with a new way to make the most of a Friday night in our suburban town: mall cop trolling. They would drive down to the nearby mall after it closed for the night and haul ass through the parking lots to lure the security guard who patrolled around in the mall cop SUV into chasing them. Everyone had some reasonably fast cars, 2 Mach 1 Mustangs and a sporty Acura, sometimes a Civic and a Dodge something or another pickup. Don't think it was a full size. So despite the acceleration that the mall cop had at his hospital, he was always outrun. These guys figured out that they changed shifts at 11 p.m., so they would wait until them before beginning, since the 11 to 7 security guard always put up a chase. You would think that he was just fine, just using us as an excuse to drive his SUV really fast and shooing us away from the premises, but apparently he had called the cops a few times in the past. It was my best friend's job to drive around the concourse of the mall parking lot, a roughly 1 to 2 mile loop, and keep an eye out for cops. My girlfriend and I always rode with him because he was the least likely to get in trouble, and we would watch the action from afar. So anyways, one time I'm driving my car to meet up with them a bit before 11 in the parking lot of a nearby hardware store. I phoned my best friend to find out exactly where they were at, and after he told me their whereabouts, he told me not to freak out about the two cop cars that are there. My girlfriend and I roll up and see our entire group talking to two police officers, and everything is obviously friendly. I found out that they had told the police officers what we did at the mall all the time, and that they got a pretty good kick out of it and said, "Oh, so you're the ones who bugged the security guard all the time." They then proceeded to tell us that they always got annoyed whenever they heard dispatch calling about us, and how they thought the security guard was an idiot for calling the cops all the time over something like that. Best part is that a couple or so weekends later, we were waiting for the shift rotation for mall security in the parking lot of a nearby pizzeria, and we saw the same two officers there when they were leaving. As he was walking to his car, he asked us what's up, and one of my friends says, "Nothing, just going to go bug the security guard again." Officer replies, "All right, just don't hurt anyone," and goes away. Only thing better than not getting in trouble for doing something illegal is getting permission to do it. Story 41. Not a cop, but made a couple of cops laugh due to the fact that I'm an idiot. The summers here are pretty hot in Melbourne, and at the time I was trying to run every day. Now, this particular day was 40 plus degrees Celsius, so I decided to wait until night to do my run. I head out at around 11 p.m. It's still quite warm, probably around 28 degrees, so I decided to run shirtless. I was in the outer eastern suburbs. It was dark, no one was around, few people would see me, and even less would care. As I leave my street, two cute golden retrievers are running around by themselves. I recognize them, as these guys have escaped before and I've returned them to a house just down the road. I walk them to the house, but it's pitch black, leered in through the windows, and everything is dark. So instead of waking everyone up, I just put these dogs in the backyard and closed the gate myself. I'd met the owners a few times anyway. Plus, it's a very chummy neighborhood. Didn't think twice about it. I continue on my run. On my way back, after about 20 minutes, I see a cop car parked in their driveway. My stomach sinks a little bit, as one would assume it had something to do with me. I sheepishly jog past, trying to assess the situation and whether or not I should intervene, but that decision is made for me when one of the officers shouts out to me, "Hey, come here!" Long story short, they assumed I was some crackhead trying to sneak in and steal their dogs. The window I leered through was actually their main bedroom, and the bloke said I looked him straight in the eyes when I was peering. Everyone was pretty relieved that it wasn't as serious as first thought and laughed very hard. The next few times I brought their dogs back, I made sure to wear a shirt and let them know who I was. Story 42. Story requires a little backstory to make sense. When I was in college, people would pay me to work the door/bounce for their parties. The host got to drink and not worry about taking money for the keg, and I got paid to drink and mess with underclassmen. I would end up with hundreds of dollars in my pockets as the night went on, and as the party wound down, me and the owners of the house went upstairs to divvy up the cash where I got my cut. Most of the time, I didn't fold the bills neatly. I more or less just shoved them into my pockets as quick as possible to keep the line moving and the money flowing. Fast forward to 2 days post-party. I had paid a friend back the $20 I owed him the day before, and I get a call from the same friend who sounds pretty distressed about something. "Daywalker," he says, "the cops are on the way to your house. They think I intentionally tried to pass off a counterfeit bill at a bank. The cops were called, and when I asked where I got the cash, I gave them your name." Like, okay, no big deal. I figured you were money counterfeiting, so no big deal, right? Obviously I'm not, so I wasn't too worried, except that literally seconds later, I get a call from some state troopers announcing that they're on the way to my house. Okay, no biggie, except I had literally just finished smoking a joint in my apartment. I give my roommate everything potentially incriminating, bongs, weed, and other assorted paraphernalia, and tell him to go stash it in our neighbor's apartment ASAP. We had just finished wrapping up when none other than the cops roll in, hot down, towards my apartment. I meet them outside, and immediately it's clear that these two jokers want to give the good cop, bad cop routine a try. They ask to come in, and I, with nothing to hide, agree. It's a far more invasive search, but they can't find the counterfeiting lab they're looking for because it doesn't exist, and I explain to them my night job as a doorman. They look at each other and realize this is a dead end and proceed to walk out. Cop 1, who's been a real douche the entire time, walks out without a word, but Cop 2 hangs back and apologizes for wasting my time. And seeing as they're leaving, I'm all smiles, but right as he's about to walk out the door, he hesitates, looks at me with a big smile and says, "And by the way, you do know it smells like weed in here," closes the door and walks out without another word. Coolest cop ever. Could have ruined my life, but decided to be the effing man instead. Story 43. Not a cop, but on the other side of things. A while back, my friends and I were back from university in our hometown on Cape Cod for the summer. My friend Diego had hooked up with a girl named Christina at a party, and they started a steamy summer romance. Christina was a bit crazy, but also really hot. We wish Diego the best. Apparently, Christina became very vocal during coitus. When parked at a pond one night, she was loud enough that people living on the other side could hear her and called the police. When the officer pulled up, they were in the middle of their fun and didn't see him until he knocked on the window. Instead of having any shame, Christina shouts out, "God effing damn it, I was just about to finish!" The officer bursts out laughing and says through the fogged up window, "Well, try and bite down on something and stop disturbing the neighbors," and then leaves. Diego, unfortunately, found most of his ardor had fled and Christina was pissed. Ended up dumping him for someone else the next week. We made fun of him for the rest of the summer, especially since Christina's new hookup was another girl. But we also had new respect for our hometown police, who were much more lenient than we had perceived them to be during our school days. Story 44. This is kind of relevant, not really, but fun story. I used to manage a bowling alley, and we were very liberal with the beer, no liquor license, and the cigarette/pot smoking. I smoked and drank on the job 24/7 pretty much since I was in my 20s and had nothing going for me. We had one league with a few cops in it. They were cops from around the area, but not our actual town. They knew we had no liquor license, but they drank and didn't seem to care. I didn't smoke pot around them, always went outside thinking I was being sneaky. About 3.5 years in, this one cop was there a little early before his league and asked if I wanted a cigarette. I said sure. He says, "Let's go outside to my car." I thought, oh, effing F, what the hell is going on? We get to his car, I'm nervous as hell. He opens his trunk and reaches in and pulls out a paper bag and tosses it to me. Confused, I open it up and inside is the biggest bag of weed I'd ever seen in my life, and my roommate and I used to buy the QP to sell. He told me to put it in my car and, quote, "don't say a effing word." I thanked him, smiled, and did just that. Not until that evening when I got home did I start to freak out, thinking it was some sort of setup/bust. I freaked out for a whole week until the next time his league was in. I was chatting with this guy who was in his league, but not on his team or a cop, and told him what happened, and I was freaking out. He said, "Hey man, don't worry. Officer Weed Giver is always giving us stuff. I have no idea where it comes from, but who cares?" We laughed. I still felt nervous, but over a couple weeks it dissipated, and that was that. It was weird. He never gave me pot again. That guy probably told him I freaked out and snitched on him or something, though. I miss that job. No idea if that guy's still a cop or maybe in jail. I haven't worked there in years. Story 45. I have a story about some really cool cops. During my grad year, my grad class decided we'd all camp out in the school field and surprise all the teachers in the morning, so one night during the week, about approximately 100 of us gather in the school field and set up our tents and whatnot. We weren't doing anything wrong, we didn't light any fires, and we were trying to be as considerate as 100 teenagers can be, so we were all hanging around, talking, playing some volleyball, basketball, and frisbee, just having fun, but some Debbie Downer decided to call the cops on us. The cops rolled by and flashed their spotlights on us. I think they were surprised to see so many kids in the school field camping at midnight during the week. So 2 cops came down and asked us what we were doing, and we all respectfully told them the truth. And so they searched the area to make sure there was no drugs or alcohol, and after they noticed we were innocent, one of the cops said that there was no reason for us to have to end the night and we were just having fun. He also included this badass life speech that just got everyone pumped. It was such a great night, and the cops were so cool. They let us have a good time. They understood what it was like for us. Story 46. Not a teenager, but we had a 20-something film student, Charlie, living 2 doors down from us. Nice enough guy who occasionally had late parties, which is remarkable only because this is a very quiet suburban neighborhood. We were young once and didn't begrudge him the fun. One day, I went to the grocery store while my wife stayed home with our 2 young daughters. On my way home, I was stopped about a quarter mile from my house by a SWAT truck blocking my street. An officer came to me and said the area was blocked off and I'd have to turn around. I pleaded that I lived just over there, gesturing to where I lived and coincidentally where 6 other cop cars were parked. No dice, of course. I had to wait. I called my wife, who told me that the cops had guns drawn on Charlie's house. We were more than a little freaked, but after a while, the police escorted Charlie and some friends out of the house at gunpoint. Turns out that earlier, another neighbor watched a man go to the door of the house with a gun yelling something. She dutifully called the police. What she didn't know was that Charlie and his friends were filming a scene for a school and the gun was fake. Charlie got ticketed for filming without a permit. Story 47. I work as a cop in a college town in Arizona. One night, me and my buddy get dispatched to a loud party in a fairly new neighborhood. As we get to the front door, I can hear people in the house yelling, "It's the cops! Shut the door and don't let them in!" Front door slams shut, music cuts off, lights get shut off, but they're still being loud as you would expect loud drunk college kids at 3 o'clock. I knock on the door and I can hear some people talking about who should answer the door or if they should answer the door at all. I hear other things like make them get a search warrant and stuff like we should just rush them. Not smart. It's just me and my buddy, and there are probably like 200 people in this house. My buddy's starting to get a little nervous and starts asking for more units, the helicopter, etc., etc. I tell them that all will be well. I knock on the door again and yell through the door, "Send out your sober representative with your terms of surrender." Just kidding, guys. Just send someone out here so we can just talk. One guy is literally thrown outside and the door shuts again. He's the chosen one. He tells me that he's just there to check out the chicks and hasn't drank one thing all night. I ask him to get the homeowner/renter, and he goes back inside to grab him. A pretty drunk resident of the house comes out to chit-chat, but this time the door remains open, and we're being watched by nearly all the partygoers. I explain to him that we have to be the party poopers and have to end the party as it's now almost 3 o'clock in the morning, and that we've had multiple complaints from surrounding neighbors. He's as cool as crap and says he understands. He apologizes and asks if there's anything he can do. I ask him to not let anyone that's been drinking drive anywhere and to keep them in the house. The guy again begins to apologize and starts to pour his beer out on the lawn, and I yell at him, "What the F are you doing? I know you're not pouring out a perfectly good beer in front of me. You better man up and chug that crap before I arrest you for wasting a finite resource." The whole party starts laughing, and I end up giving the kid a high five just as my sergeant pulls up. We stay on the scene to make sure everyone driving off is sober. Free preliminary breath test for everyone. The residents of the house end up picking up all the beer cans they had in front in the backyard, and some that ended up in the neighbors' yards. No tickets, no arrests, no threats or acts of violence, and no further complaints from the neighbors. Story 48. My friends worked at a locally owned sporting goods store in late high school. They used to blow bomb, smoke weed, in the back storage trailer on break all the time. The store manager was the coolest dude you could imagine, so my friends had after-hours access to use the shop, get high, etc. We used the shop to fart around on many unhealthy projects, but the best was a legit 4 by 3.5 foot gravity bong out of plastic from the industrial store next door. We'd get wrecked on that for years to come. Johnny enjoyed coaxing strangers at parties to take a small hit, and then watch them die coughing and pass out. One weekend, we decided to throw a beach bonfire, so we met at the store after it closed per usual. We'd gather some wood from the pallets and get lit, per usual. Well, we do our thing, pretty much hotboxing the small store like it was our job. Everyone is zombieing around the floor when a random car pulls in and points his lights in the shop. We kinda panicked, hid, scattered, hit the deck, etc. We didn't have to hide since we had permission, but it was fun and we were stoned, so we indulged. I think someone did a jump roll like he was in Nam. The person leaves and we think nothing of it, until my friend and I decide to head out about 10 minutes later. We're sitting in my car in the parking lot when boom, we hear a ghetto bird and simultaneously notice the spotlight. "Oh crap, they're looking for someone," I said, backing out, still not realizing we were that someone. As I go to pull out of the lot, like a movie, 10 to 15 cop cars with lights and sirens come from all angles, jumping the curb onto the lawn, driving the opposite side of the street, sliding in like it's home plate, etc. Cops jump out of their cars, guns drawn, hiding behind their doors. At this point, my calm and collected friend sarcastically and inappropriately says to me, "Are we being detained?" Over the loudspeaker, they have me drop the keys out of the window and get out on my knees, hands above my head. We're higher than the gas prices during the Bush administration. The chopper, buzzing above, is ready for a multi-kill. They cuff me, put me in the back of a car, and proceed to raid the place. Long story short, they pulled my buddy out too, and combined, we had about 2 grams of weed and a small, bright pink lighter. For some reason, the cops thought the pink lighter was hilarious and gave us a bunch of crap for it. The person who pointed their headlights in thought the place was being burglarized by armed men, thus the theatrics. Ultimately, they let us go after the store manager came by half asleep, looked at us with a smirk, and told us to F off. The guys that worked there were caught in the gloriously hotbox store and reprimanded by the manager and police. In the end, the bong wasn't compromised. Nobody was fired or arrested, and the store manager just told us to take our herbal activities elsewhere. Story 49. I'm not a cop. I got pulled over. For me, this was an embarrassing situation. This is the other side of the story, I guess. After hanging out with my lady friend one night, we ate some oysters for dinner. When I was eating them, they didn't taste great. That friend lived about 25 to 30 minutes away from home, driving at the speed limit. So I gave her a goodnight kiss, said goodbye, and was on my way home. I usually have about a 20-minute window from the brewing of a stomach storm to unleashing El Nino on my toilet. The second I got into the car, the perfect storm started coming together. Nothing beats pooping in the comfort of your own bathroom. So I decided to drive fast to get home in time. I was driving about 70 to 75 mph in a 45 mph zone. Most of the journey was relatively easy because it was 2 a.m. and there weren't too many cars. I was about 7 to 8 minutes away from home. Suddenly, I see some flashing lights behind me. I'm like, are you effing kidding me? I pull over to the side of the road. At this point, my stomach is like at a 13 out of a 1 to 10 on how urgently I need to unleash that storm. I'm dripping in cold sweat, face pale white. I'm a tan Asian, clenching my a-hole as tight as I can. Officer pulls up, shines a flashlight at my face, and asks for license and registration, the routine. And then he looked at my face or something because his tone suddenly changed. Son, are you all right? I reply to the officer, Sir, I really have to use the bathroom. I'm about 5 minutes away from my house. You can follow me home and then give me a ticket at my house, but I really have to go. He checks my license and goes to his car, confirms the address is close by or some crap, I don't know. He came back 3 minutes later, which felt like 30 goddamn minutes. In the meantime, I'm continuously releasing gas and turning my car into a greenhouse gas toxic chamber. He looks at me, laughs a bit. Mother effing laughing at my misery. Son, don't drive too fast late at night. Be safe. I'll leave you with a verbal warning this time, since it seems you really have to go to the bathroom. I sped off, got home, took a painful crap. I refused to eat oysters after that for about half a year. Story 51. So it was the last week before we left sixth form. Don't know what the US equivalent is, college? A few weeks before, me and two other friends had randomly entered the school and climbed to the top of the building, about 2 to 3 stories. The view was incredible. So we decided to build a sign that said something like Class of '07 and hang it on the roof of the school. I don't know if we'd been caught on CCTV the first time or if my headmaster was just expecting something to be done, but he had the caretakers patrolling the grounds overnight. It was like something out of a Splinter Cell game. We were casing the police, watching their patrol route, and deciding when to go. The way we built the sign was a huge bedsheet on top of a crucifix-shaped block of wood. So we're waiting outside the grounds for hours, waiting for an opportunity to climb, when suddenly the police show up. I've never had a run-in with the police, so I crap myself. Not literally. Some of my mates run, but there's about 4 of us that just accept our fate. I should also mention that one of my mates was wearing a balaclava, rolled up as a hat because it was freezing, which he decided to toss into a bush at the last minute as the police rolled up. The bloke gets out of the car, walks right past us, kicks the balaclava out of the bush, and explains to us that there were complaints of a group of lads walking about this area wearing dodgy gear. Someone suspected us of burglaring. I had to walk the policeman over to the giant bush and retrieve the crucifix and explain the situation. He used to go to my school and said he respected the effort, but he couldn't allow it to happen, which I understood. They took our names and sent us on our way. So I know that the stories that we read are international from all different kinds of countries, but just the verbiage here, I feel weird saying it in my American accent, talking about a group of lads walking about the area wearing dodgy gear. Like, we just don't talk like that in the States. So, I don't know. Does that bother anybody else? A group of lads walking about wearing dodgy gear. I mean, does that sound better? I don't know. I'm losing my mind. Let's just move on. Story 52. Not a cop, but, preface, engage. It's 1997, my senior year of high school, and I'm living with my dad and grandma in my grandma's house at the time. My grandma was a real community-minded lady, and would often volunteer at police functions and bring the local public servants like them in the FD treats like cookies and cupcakes and stuff, so they knew her and liked her quite well. Well, one night around 9 p.m., I'm walking home from the mall with my friend Nigel, who lives a couple blocks over from me. When we get there, having left my key at home accidentally, I knock on the door, seeing my grandma's car in the driveway, figuring she would let me in. After waiting a good minute or two with no response, I ring the doorbell. Again, nothing. At this point, I start getting worried about my grandma. It's very unlike her to not answer the door, and she very, very rarely ever goes anywhere with anyone, leaving her car at home. I tried another 5 minutes to summon her, figuring maybe she's in the bathroom or something, before starting to really freak out. I quickly tell Nigel to stay here in case she comes out, while I go around and try the back door. On my way around, I peer into my grandma's window, which had the light on, hoping to see her conked out asleep. Her main curtains are open, but her lacy, kind of see-through undercurtain dealies are shut, so I can't see clearly, but I notice a roughly human-sized shape on her bed. I knock and pound on the window, screaming, "Grandma, are you okay? Hello?" To no avail. The shape doesn't move. F this, I decide, and head back to the front door where I left Nigel, fully intent on breaking the door down to make sure my grandma was okay. Right as I come around the corner of the house, 5 police cruisers come screaming down my block, light blaring, sirens on full blast. They all screech to a stop in front of us, and the officers jump out on effing point. "Get on the ground! Hands in the air!" and all that. I should probably mention that Nigel and I were goth kids at the time. To any casual observer, we were obvious trouble. Long black hair, long black coats, sneaking and banging around this old lady's house in the middle of the night. Thankfully, this is a couple years before Columbine, or we might have been put down by trigger-happy popos. After frisking and cuffing our immediately compliant and prone selves, the officers asked us what we were doing, and I explained. They told us that a neighbor had seen us creeping around and had called them, reporting a home invasion. And when they learned whose house it was, the 2 cars that were dispatched immediately turned to every car in the area. Someone was effing with a nice lady that baked them treats and was gonna get wrecked. What they got were 2 nerds in black outfits, one of which was overly concerned for their grandmother's well-being and was now a blubbering, frightened mess on his own lawn. About this time, a car pulls up and lets my grandma out. She'd been out with a friend who had come into town to visit, one of the very rare times she left without her car. And they all had a good laugh about it as I try, through my tears and sniffling, to not let the night's events scar me for life. Nigel refused to go to my house any more at night, and my dad gave me a second round of uproarious laughter when he got home from work that evening. Oh, and the shape on the bed? Just some clothes that she was folding when her friend stopped by and suggested they go out to dinner. Story 53. When my SO still both lived at home, we would F in the car, parked in places that we didn't think we'd get caught all the time. One night, we saw a torch light through the fogged windows and thought, oh, F, some kind of murder, mugger, essayer, etc. is coming. Apparently, the cops had actually turned off their blue and reds because when my SO wound the window down, that's who it was. So they freaked out, threw me my undershirt, that's not the main place I want covered, and grabbed all of their own clothes. They then forgot how clothes worked, tried to just stick them on by putting them on top of the right areas, and wound the window all the way down. Young male police officer looks in. All color drains from his face, and he stammers out, "Oh, we thought you might have been smoking something, but clearly, no drugs in the No? Good, okay. Get back to what you were doing." Without pause, and scurried back to his car. My SO claims they saw his older female partner lying her head off and looking knowing, so either he was overenthusiastic about potentially catching a hotboxer and she knew better, or she set him up. Also, the fact that he said, "get back to what you were doing," means that, even many years later, we joke that we have police permission to F in cars if we ever want to again. Also, he didn't even say, "it's okay," or something like that. It was, "get back to what you were doing." So, at the time, I, jokingly, told my SO that we were legally obligated to continue. Story 54. Late to the party, but oh well. This happened when I was 17, shortly after getting my license. Me and my buddy were driving to a local creek to take our new RC crawler out for some major fun. Just down the road from the park, my friend tells me how quiet my car is, and me being young and dumb, turned to him and said, "Oh yeah? Is this quiet?" and proceeded to floor it. Sure enough, after I started to slow down, I looked in my rearview mirror and an unmarked pickup truck was zooming after me. We had just smoked a J and I had hit 50 mph in a 25, so I was crapping myself. They smell weed from the get-go and see we're both lit up like a Christmas tree and have us get out to search us and the car. While they're searching, they see our RC car and are clearly impressed. They find our weed and he says, "Oh look, a $5 nug." It was some fire, more like 15, bro. He then gets to the trunk and sees my hot bag. I worked as a pizza delivery driver, and he looks at me with the biggest grin and asks if I deliver pizza, to which I say yes, and the 2 officers just bust up laughing. They ended up giving us both a long lecture about being safer. I was so scared, and I'm pretty sure I looked it, and let us go on our way. And the best part? We even got to keep our $5 nug. Story 55. I'm not a cop, but this story makes me happy. When I graduated from a university in Indiana in 2006, my mom said she would pay for me to throw a party. It wasn't anything crazy. I bought a keg and some food. I lived with 3 other girls in a house we rented from one of the girls' parents, and there was a backyard. We set up beer pong back there, and we're blasting music. Everyone on that street was in school, so it wasn't like local residents or anything that we were pissing off. One of the girls in the house was not 21. She was a freshman, and her friends were not 21, but everyone was invited. I didn't care. So we're outside, drunk as hell, playing beer pong and flip cup and being awesome. Now, behind all the houses on this street is kind of like an alley road that runs behind the houses. A cop car pulls up to us on that road. All the underage kids freak out and leave. I'm drunk, so I'm only slightly freaked out. Figure we're too loud. It's my party, so I ask the officer if everything's okay or if we're being too loud because we can quiet down. He says, nah, I'm sorry your friends left. They didn't have to go. He then proceeds to hang out with us for like 20 minutes. He didn't drink anything, but was cool as F. That was my only run-in with the cops, and it was awesome. Oh, except the house party I went my first weekend at college. Cops busted us up, but just let us all leave, so no underage drinking tickets or anything were handed out. Story 56. When I worked for the jail, we had a cop bring 2 brothers in. Both were late teens/early 20s. The cop was laughing. I asked him what was so funny. He said, "Read this," and gave me the arrest report. The cop apparently came up on a disabled vehicle beside a rural road in the county. Upon pulling up to the vehicle, he saw Brother A standing in front of the car as if watching for something. This was around midnight. Upon exiting the vehicle, he walked up to Brother A and asked what the problem was. Brother A acted fidgety and said, "No problem, officer." The cop says, "Did you break down?" It was about this time the cop noticed Brother B over the embankment laying, as if hiding. The cop immediately notices a dead deer carcass under Brother B. Indecent exposure charges were made, and the other brother had a capias. So they were both brought in. Apparently, they were both taking turns with the deer. Another time was around Christmas. A church in the area had a live sheep in its nativity scene. A guy, early 20s, was found having his way with the sheep and was brought in for indecent exposure and animal abuse. Story 57. My brother and 2 of our friends were in a band in high school and played a show for a friend's birthday that was held on the top floor of the town hall building, which was sort of like a dance hall that the city rented out for parties, wedding receptions, etc. A bit of backstory. My brother's dream was to smash a guitar at the end of a show, Cobain style. He had somehow acquired this crappy Strat knockoff for that exact purpose. The thing wasn't even playable. It was missing at least 3 machine heads, a couple knobs, and a pickup. It's also worth noting our town's population was something like 2,000 people, so the entire city police department consisted of a handful of officers who knew pretty much everybody. Anyway, like 30 people showed up for the party. We played for a couple sets and had a generally fun time. It's getting close to the city-wide noise curfew, 10 p.m. I think, and Officer Jim rolls up to kindly remind us to wrap it up and to lock down the top floor for the night. Well, at the same time, we're finishing our closing song, saying our thank yous, when my brother whips out the Strat and bangs it on the floor a couple of times. Amazingly, the thing didn't just shatter, so he decides to throw it out the effing window at the exact moment Officer Jim showed up. Everyone kind of picked up on this and fell silent, and my brother had that "oh crap" look on his face. Then Officer Jim just looks over and says with a deadpan, "Well, I hope you didn't hit the cruiser." Story 58. This happened to us, non-cops, was quite a few years ago. I and 3 friends were driving home in my buddy's Jeep, late at night and super high. Think terrified, laughing high. A cop had been following us for about 20 minutes on this long straight road that connected our town with another, and we spent the entire ride encouraging the driver, who was known to crack in these types of situations. Just as we pulled into town, the pressure finally too much, my friend accidentally pulls the wrong way into the highway and were pulled over immediately. As we were 4 guys around the age of 18 and who probably looked super high, the cop, a female and actually very kind, asked us all to get out and sit on the curb. She then called for backup and asked us a few normal cop questions. The backup, a higher-ranking, very large and kind of redneck, older officer, arrived with another cop and started searching the car. All of the pot had been smoked, in blunt form, so no paraphernalia. So we were confident that we were in no danger. He questioned us about a few curious items as he found them. Some no-dose pills, a trumpet, and some antibiotics. But upon continuing their search, they suddenly paused as they seemed to discover something more interesting. From the curb, we could all see them holding the something and discussing it intently. but couldn't tell what it was. Finally, the senior cop came over, and from behind his back whips out a naked Barbie doll that had its hair roughly and unevenly cut. The driver and owner of the vehicle immediately shouted that it belonged to Ricky, a guy who had, up until this point, not spoken a single word. Ricky stammered in protest, but didn't manage to actually say anything coherent. The cops just looked more disgusted than amused, but almost immediately let us go without incident. You could tell that they couldn't even begin to create a reason to hold us further, and seemed just disappointed. On the ride home, we were mostly silent. To this day, we're still all good friends. The owner of the car has never provided a satisfactory reason for having the doll. Story 60. Not an officer, but my friends and I had a close call. Myself and a couple close friends went to visit a buddy in college. He lived in a frat house, but they were actually pretty cool, and they had an open room, so we just stayed there for the weekend. I should mention it was a small town in Wisconsin where the good fireworks are legal, from Minnesota where only boring ones are legal. So we're partying nonstop, basically because they're on break. We decide to get some fireworks and launch to celebrate. Being deprived of loud, exciting fireworks back home, we of course buy some huge mortar-looking fireworks that launch out of a tube. We party the night away and decide that now is the time. Our friend tells us it's a bad idea and refuses to take part of it, but didn't really tell us not to do it. So we got out and immediately set up the big-ass mortar firework and aim it straight up. The firework explodes upwards with a loud whistle, hits a tree branch, lands on top of the roof, and explodes with the loudest noise I've ever heard. We were actually loading up another one when a couple squad cars roll up, hands on guns, searching houses nearby. They get to us and we just stand there. They said their sensors detected gunshots. Immediately we told them it was us. They just calmly told us that fireworks weren't allowed inside city limits and to not do it again. I have some other ones if anyone wants to hear them. Story 61. About 2.5 months ago, myself and 3 friends, 18 to 19, were all piled in my friend's, I'll call him Dave, recently finished Camaro. He's been working on it with the help of another fellow in the car for about a year. Keep in mind that we're all drunk, baked, or both. We pull up to a red light nearish to downtown St. Paul, Minnesota, and realize we need to take a U-turn to drop me off since I had to be at work in a few hours. It was probably around 1 a.m. Dave, who was driving, decides it's a great idea to pull out into the crosswalk and reverse into the left turn lane. Myself and 2 other friends who are in the back seat get a great look at the SPPD SUV make a turn past us. We inform Dave of this, and he makes the smart decision of not making the illegal U-turn, but instead pulls into the parking lot just down the road to turn around, but lo and behold, there's a different cruiser that pulls in behind us and flashes his lights. Instead of pulling into a parking space, Dave gets the bright idea of just parking immediately, smack dab in the middle of the lot. The cop comes up, asks if we've been drinking tonight, and of course we all say no, and that we just pulled in to check out the car because it had been wobbling in the back. It had. He then asked to see license and reg. And while he's looking at my friend, the same SUV we saw before pulls up. The cops converse while we're all crapping our pants because Dave has had a DWI and a DUI in the past and only recently got his license back. They come back and start talking with Dave about possible car problems. Dave gets out and all 4 of them, Dave and 3 members of SPPD, start looking at the tires all around the car. During this, 2 more Roseville PD officers arrive. They have a reputation for being really strict and proceed to ask what the problem is. The guy in the front seat who worked on the car with Dave opens the door to get out and help, but realizes he has a good amount of dankness in his jacket. So to avert suspicion, in his eyes, he just keeps the door open and starts yelling to Dave about possible problems/solutions while just sitting in the front seat with the seatbelt still on. A few minutes later, the original cop who pulled us over lets it be known that he owned the same model car when he was in high school, and how he liked to fly down the streets to impress friends and girls alike back in the day. After this, he asks if we know how to get home from here. We do, and tells us to have a good night. The 3 cop cars pull out and go about their night, and everyone gets home safe. Story 62. Story of the BU police chief I met. I went to Boston University for college, freshman during fall 2002. I lived on Bay State Road. To those who don't know, it's a bunch of brownstone dorms. My RA basically tricked me and a couple other freshmen into going into the streets weekly RA meeting, where we would learn about all the university rules about drinking, guests, blah blah blah, at the bigger dorm on the street. The towers for anyone who knows. We go to the lobby to wait for other people to show up. The chief of the BU police is there, and my RA starts talking to him a bit. So we're sitting there, bored and annoyed that our RA tricked us, when we notice there's a big 60-inch projection TV there. Within 5 minutes, 3 dudes come down with their PS2 and load up Grand Theft Auto 3 and start playing. I start watching because I had F else to do, but the dudes were a little peculiar. They were driving around a bit but not doing anything, until they found a cop walking on the street. They stop and get out and enter in the all weapons cheat. It's around here the chief of police stands behind them and starts watching. The guys proceed to punch the cop, then stab the cop, then Glock the cop, then machine gun the cop, then shotgun the cop, then flamethrower the cop. They proceed to use literally every single weapon to shoot this dead cop, unknowing that the chief of BUPD is right behind them. My RA, after finally noticing, walks up to the officer and asks, Do you want me to ask them to stop playing? The cop laughs and says, hell no. If I was home, I'd be playing this too right now. Funniest and coolest cop ever. I don't know if the dudes ever realized he was behind him the whole time, watching them murder cops. Story 63. Not a cop, but when I was in the Air Force, I was in the dorms on base when I first became operational. At the time, our heat was messed up, so even though I had the heat off, it still came through the vent. It was like the thermostat was always on 80 degrees Fahrenheit. So one Friday night, I was playing some rock band with my door open, and not an hour later, there were around 15 people in my tiny-ass room. At one point, around 11:30 p.m., my piss mate comes in drunk and decides he wants to sing some Queen, specifically Somebody to Love. Well, we're about halfway through the song when I notice a light from behind me. Wondering who the hell has a flashlight, I pause the game and we all turn around to see 2 security forces guys standing in my doorway. As usual, they ask if any of us had been drinking. Only my pissmate had, but he was 21. Apparently, one of my friends and one of the cops, a T sergeant, had had a run-in before. They asked us for our IDs, and he was the only one who didn't have his on him. Of course, the guy got an attitude and demanded my friend take him to his room to get his ID. As soon as they got into the stairwell, the other cop, a second lieutenant, probably younger than me, says they were just patrolling when they heard music, and he said he asked his partner, Is that Queen? And we all talked about playing Battlefield and Call of Duty until the other guy got back, and they just told us to be quiet. After that, we all just went down to the smoke pit and laughed about it. Story 64. I'm not a cop, and I'm not sure what I did was illegal, but here goes. One time, I was invited by a girl to a quinceañera party in a hotel, but she had reception for only one person. Apparently, she forgot to tell me before dragging me with her, and I had to stay outside the salon. Anyways, a friend from school also attended. He was a Chamblian and wasn't supposed to be in and out because crap the receptionist kept making up, so I couldn't even have that for the night. Fast forward a few hours, and me trying to sneak in with various other guests that happen to be in the same school, I tried calling the Chamblian friend from a window outside the hotel, because now security wouldn't even let me into the building. It was in a second floor, so I had to climb my way up there, when suddenly I see red and blue lights flickering, reflecting in the window. Behind me, a police car was just arriving and stopped right below me. Officer comes out and says something along the lines of the usual, "What's going on up there, kid?" And I told him what was actually happening. Whiny, unfair receptionist included. He just replied, "Okay, just don't hurt yourself on the way down, son." And like that, he returned to his car and drove away. I got to enter the party a few moments later because a good-hearted security guy had mercy on my cold-ass self and let me in. Story 65. One night stand in the middle of January. It was -5 and my dad told me specifically not to go outside. My friends and I were having a get-together at a pal's house. Everyone decides we should go streak through a nearby neighborhood. Don't ask why. So we all set out towards it. We arrive behind a house near the entrance and realize we aren't sure what to do next. So imagine 10 unclothed teenagers just standing behind the house in the snow in -5-degree weather, nervously laughing and talking loudly about 1 a.m. All of a sudden, a cop car rolls up to the entrance with a spotlight on. Not sure if we're seen. Everyone scatters. I decided I didn't want to jump the 6-foot spiked iron fence in front of me and look to the house behind us, where a female friend of mine lived. Incredibly, she heard us out behind her house, so I nakedly ran into the middle of her backyard, urging her to let me in. She does, gives me clothes, and we sit for a bit so I could warm up before I ask if she would just drive me back to my friend's house. Before we go, though, we drive around the neighborhood to see if any of my friends are there. After finding no one, we're about to leave when we drive by the cul-de-sac she lived in near the entrance of the neighborhood, when we had been caught. Seeing lights at the end of the driveway, we slowly roll towards it. Sure enough, there are 4 cop cars shining their lights on someone's front yard, where 7 of my friends stand freezing. We turn around and she takes me back to my friend's basement, where I find 2 of my friends shivering in front of a fire. They had army crawled through the snow to escape. We found out later that a murder, very uncommon, had happened in the area a week prior, so cops were out on high alert each night. There's also an incredible photo of my friends in the front yard of the house with all the cops facing them. In the end, only some of the guys got in trouble for indecent exposure. Most had brought boxers just in case, but it was talk of the town the next day. Story 66. So, quite a few years ago, myself and my buddy were driving to Donington Monsters of Rock Festival in England. This was my favorite weekend of the year and an excuse for much shenanigans. I was about 19 at the time and a skinny waif. My partner in crime was a pub landlord's son, quite a bit larger than me and with a much better tolerance of alcohol. Please note at this juncture I do not condone drinking and driving, but we were younger and stupider. Anyway, we pull on to the A12, local highway, and Nick, for that is his name, asked me to open the glove compartment. In there, I find a bottle of lime, cordial, and a pint glass. I was already aware of the 24 cans of cheap lager we had on the back seat. Anyway, Nick asks to pour him a lager and lime, which I do, and he promptly proceeds to sip his pint, calm as you like whilst driving. I, too, naturally partake in a beer, and we go off on our merry way in the direction of Cambridgeshire. Once we get there, we stop at an old pub that Nick's dad ran. We play some pool and have a couple more pints, say hi to some of his old friends, and resume our journey. Nick is quite careful, whilst I'm more enthusiastic about my consumption. The footwell of the Ford Sierra we're in on my side by this time contains a few crushed cans, and I continue to sup. Nick had by this time ceased his intake. We're proceeding towards our destination when, on a dual carriageway, 2-lane highway, encounter 4 cars with caravans, trailers, all hogging the outside lane and doing about 40 miles per hour. The inside lane is perfectly clear, so illegally, Nick decides to undertake the slow coaches. As soon as he clears, blue lights appear in the rearview mirror. We pull up and Nick takes a hit from a breath freshener. The officer approaches the car and instructs Nick to accompany him to the police vehicle. Me, in a panic, hides the can of beer behind the driver's seat and waits. After a short time, the officer returns to me and the car and gets in the driver's seat. He asks if I understand what has happened. I do, stopped for the undertaking maneuver. Asks if my friend has been drinking, just had a couple, and who's responsible for all the empty beer cans. That would be me. He proceeds to tell me that my friend has blown over the limit and that he would be driving the car and me to the station whilst the arrest and testing was processed. As we pull away, I ask the officer if it's an offense for the passenger to drink alcohol in a car, which he informs me is not. So I reached behind the driver's seat, grabbed my beer and said, "Well, you won't mind if I finish this one then." And I proceeded to have the officer drive me to Central Huntingdon Police Station whilst I enjoyed my warm, cheap lager. Incidentally, my mate was a nurse and knew he was fine, so requested a blood test, which he indeed passed. But honestly, not worth the risk, kids. Story 67. Back in my sophomore year of college, a few friends of mine and I were hanging out trying to find something to do. We had heard about a haunted cemetery that was right around the corner from where we lived. We began looking up the stories from people online and were intrigued, so we headed out there. Probably about 10 steps into the cemetery, a police car pulled up to the entrance. He stopped us and told us to wait outside for a few minutes and collected all of our licenses. Next thing we know, 6 more police cars showed up, and we all about crapped our pants thinking we were going to get in trouble for trespassing. After 15 to 20 minutes of talking with the officers, they asked what we were doing, and we explained the truth that we were just looking to see if it was really haunted. The officers all looked at each other and turned back to us saying, quote, "Right, let's go check and see what we got." 3 officers took us around the cemetery, eventually leading to a small cabin-like shed towards the center of the property. We had read from some stories online that this was where the most paranormal activity took place. We all walked in to find a small funeral ceremony kind of area, almost like a mini church, with the benches on both sides and the aisle down the middle with a table at the end, probably used for the caskets. Just as the door behind us closed, the officers turned all of their flashlights off and left us all sitting in darkness. We heard them say, "See guys, there isn't anything here." Next thing we know, there's a banging at the door. One of my friends was terrified before we even stepped in the cemetery, and he flipped. The rest of us started getting a little antsy, asking what the hell was going on. Turned out the other officers had followed behind us and planned to scare the crap out of us all along. We had a pretty good laugh about it afterwards. We didn't get in trouble, but damn, we definitely got the scare we wanted that night. Story 68. Not a cop, but worked in my local police department as a student worker in high school. Years ago, on my senior spring break, I was going to use the first day off to get my driver's license finally. I'm excited and nervous, and then ask my mom if I can drive on the way to the DMV for a little extra practice. She says yes, and we get in the car, and I see a truck coming about 4 to 5 houses down the street before I got in the driver's seat, which was exposed on the street side, and decide to get in and wait for him to pass. I get in, turn on the car, check my side mirror, and see the truck coming right into the corner of our car. Like something out of a movie, I said, "Oh crap," when the driver of the truck hit our car's driver's side rear corner, swerved left, and then right in the street. Go up our driveway, swipe the bumper of our other car in the driveway, then go onto my neighbor's lawn before finally T-boning their parked car. I called the police station for work and had units come in. A lot of the officers were cops who worked the morning to afternoon shift and all knew me. A lot of them were surprised to see it was me that they were responding to and asked what happened. After telling them, one officer, that I still know today, simply said, quote, "So you went to get your license and got into a 4-car wreck before putting your car into drive." Him and the others all laughed and helped me de-stress in that moment. When I went to work that afternoon, they were all in the patrol lounge area sharing the story that happened just a few hours ago. Didn't get my license, but did get it the next day. Story 69. I was a TA in college, and we had campus police walk along with us twice a week as we did our night rounds. We had an uneventful tour of our 10-level building, and we're going back down to put the paperwork in the office and be done, when we hear wham, 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 wham. We go running and turn a corner. Nothing. It's a dark lounge with a few candy machines in it. All of a sudden, wham! Wham, 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 wham. The candy machine on the farthest end is moving, rocking on its legs. Wham! Slamming into the machine next to it. We both figure it's some sort of vandalism or robbery attempt. Nope, we get to the end and there's some lovebirds. The girl has his underwear in her mouth. He has been blindfolded with her granny panties? Still not sure about that. They look like they'd be too big for her. They're still unaware that we're standing there. I have to say, they were both athletic and, under the circumstances, I probably wouldn't have minded continuing to watch till the end. But the female cop I was with, she was kind of a brute. Buzz cut, mustache, funny as hell, but you know. Not what I would call warm and fuzzy. She turned on the lights, and I'll never forget the muffled squeal of the girl screaming for 3 seconds in her boyfriend's underwear. There was the requisite mad scramble to cover private parts with whatever was handy. The cop said, "We're going to turn around. Get dressed." We did. She was laughing until we turned around again and saw the damage that had been done. One of the machine's clear plastic windows was broken. The food was all over the place. The metal frames of the machines had been bent and ripped open. She said, "You know, you would have been fine if you hadn't been so stupid." And she threw the book at them both. Their parents had to come to campus for a review session, after the university threatened to throw them both out of school. The vending company took the kids to court for vandalism. They were judged responsible for damage to the vending machines and the stock inside them, at the price each item was listed in the machine. The vending company listed the machines as totaled, so the kids were responsible for the full new value of both machines as well. I had to give a statement as part of the proceedings. The only small mercy that was the student crime column in the college newspaper somehow never got wind of the proceedings. The boy and girl broke up, which might be a shame because their children might have been the bionic, ultra-gorgeous super peoples. After she gave them the tickets and sent them home, I remember the girl's underwear laying on the floor next to the vending machines. I had the distinct feeling that those panties were going home with the lady cop. The world will never know. Story 70. I'm not a cop, nor do I know any cops. I was also a pretty decent kid. I never went out partying or underage drinking or anything like that. But this is the story of the most interesting time I was pulled over by a cop. This was back in high school, probably around 2005 to 2006. My friends and I had decided not to eat at TGI Fridays like we normally would on Friday nights. Instead, we thought we would be swanky and head to a nice Japanese restaurant in a decent part of town. Being high school students, teens, none of us really gave a crap about dress code because why would we really care? We were invincible. Anyway, the night goes on, and dinner for all 5 of us goes on longer than expected. We head back to my place, where they all parked, and it must have been around 2300 as we were leaving, if not later. So now there are 5 teens getting into a car in a really good neighborhood who are more or less dressed not so well. Someone called the cops and thought we had stolen the car. About 5 minutes up the road, I see a police car in my rearview mirror, and it's slowly following us, like cops do when they're hunting tags. Well, a few minutes later, the cop pulls up next to us and turns his lights on. He's on the passenger side of the car, still in his vehicle, and demands that we roll down the window. We do this, and I crap you not, he shouts to my friends, "Hey, do you know Addercorn 214's full name? It's Addercorn 214, Addercorn 214, blah 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 blah." I do have 5 names. No, I'm not rich. My parents just like tradition. They're Greek and English. My friends start cracking up, and the officer just drives away, giggling like a middle school girl who just made her crush laugh. Story 71. I had just turned 18 and had been out drinking with friends at a local bar and then nightclub. After last call, we headed back to a friend's place close by to keep drinking and to smoke a bit of weed. Me and a couple of my mates had our cars there already. We started the night there, with changes of clothes, and we all wanted to get out of our dress clothes into something more comfortable. So we head down to the car park and we all start getting changed. Next thing you know, there's a cop car pulling up, lights flashing and spotlight fixed on 3 half-dressed young guys in a deserted car park at 3 a.m. The cops get out and explain there's been a burglary in the area, and we match the description and numbers reported, i.e. 3 young white males, and it looked mighty suspicious that we were changing clothes at 3 a.m., which is a pretty fair call. Then we all had to empty our pockets and explain what we were doing and where we'd been, etc., and the cops went through our cars. Unfortunately, I had a small Meadow tobacco tin full of weed, and when I was asked to empty my pockets, that had to come out too. Both police were pretty young, and the youngest of the 2 was searching me. He sees the tin and asks what's in it. I reply, tobacco? I obviously wasn't very convincing as he asked me to open the tin, and that unmistakable odor washes over the both of us. It was some pretty good crap. The cop smirks and says, quote, "That sure doesn't smell like tobacco, mate. Close it up and put it back on the boot of the car with the rest of your belongings and wait here while I look through your car." I'm crapping myself at this point. He finishes his search of my car and says, "Okay, you can grab your stuff now and finish getting changed, but don't go anywhere." And he and his partner go and confer by the squad car. So I grab all my belongings off the boot of the car, including tin full of weed, and stuff them all back into my pockets. I'm now thinking I might just get away with this. Cops finish their chat and walk back over. They explain to us that we're good to go back to my friend's apartment and to maybe not get changed in car parks at 3 a.m. in the future as it looks suspicious. I'm elated. I get to keep my weed. I turn and start walking off only to have the younger cop tap me on the shoulder. Crap. He says, "Where's the tin, mate?" To which I reply, you said I could grab my things, so I did." He laughs and says, "Don't be a bloody idiot, mate. Give it here. I'm not letting you keep that." Chuckles, but ballsy move nonetheless. The other cop starts laughing at this point. So I dejectedly hand over my tin and the cop smirks, shakes his head, and pops the tin in his pocket and they leave. He could have arrested me for possession, but I'm pretty sure those 2 cops went on and got high after their shift. Story 72. I'm not a cop, but felt like I should share. This didn't happen to me. In fact, I wasn't there. But my friends joke about it so much that we all know it by heart. Okay, so here goes. Back in high school, my friends, Dave and Chad, not their real names, wanted to go and see a movie. They didn't know what was playing at the time, so they tried to dial the operator for information. They were home alone, and this was in a time before most theaters put showtimes online. My friend Dave dials 411 thinking he was going to get information. Nope, it goes right to the police dispatcher. "Hello, 911, what's your emergency?" My friend Dave was a little antisocial at the time, so he stutters and mumbles some incoherent words into the receiver. Just at that time, his sister comes down the stairs, yelling at the top of her lungs about some random thing that really did need to be spoken about at such a high level. She's really upset, however, and the police dispatcher can hear her loud and clear. "Sir, is everything okay?" Dave panics, and all he can say is, "Yeah, everyone's fine." In the background, his sister keeps screaming. Chad goes over to calm her down, but only ends up making it worse. "Sir, I'm going to send over a unit to your location." Click. Dave hangs up the phone. He has no idea what to do next. For all he knows, the police think a murder is happening in his house. Chad and his sister freak out and bail on Dave. He's left alone in his house, waiting for the police to arrive. Luckily, Dave's father comes home before the police show up. He has enough time to explain to his dad what happened. About an hour later, an officer finally shows up. At this point in the story, Dave would remark that if he had been committing a murder, he would have had enough time to hide the body and escape long before the cop showed up. Anyway, Dave's father meets the officer in his yard and explains what happened. After that, they have a long discussion about sports and things, and then he leaves. The only thing the officer yelled at Dave for was when he called him a cop. Apparently, the police in my area wish to be called officer.